I was sitting in my bathrobe at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, eating leftover meatloaf straight from the Tupperware, when my phone lit up with the message that would split my life into before and after. The glow from the screen made the kitchen feel even emptier than it already was. I'd been scrolling through photos of my grandchildren, photos I wasn't tagged in, photos I had to find by searching my daughter's name because she'd stopped inviting me into her digital world months ago, when the notification dropped down from the top of my screen like a guillotine blade. It was from Trevor, my oldest. My firstborn. The baby I'd pushed into this world during a thunderstorm so violent the hospital lost power twice. The boy I'd rocked through colic and night terrors and his father's abandonment. The man who now, at 34 years old, had apparently found the courage to tell me exactly what he thought of me. "We've finally concluded that you're no longer our mother," the message read. No greeting. No preamble. Just a surgical strike designed to sever whatever threads still connected us. Don't come to Thanksgiving. Don't come to Christmas. Don't come to any gatherings. We've all agreed. You've caused too much damage. We're done. I stared at those words until they blurred. My hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone into my meatloaf. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. I'd never noticed how loud it was before, like a countdown to something I couldn't name. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around my ribcage and was slowly, methodically, tightening them. Then I saw it. The little thumbs-up icon beneath Trevor's message. A like. From my daughter. From Emma. My baby girl who I'd homeschooled through her anxiety, who I'd sat with in hospital rooms during her eating disorder, who I'd defended against every criticism and protected from every hurt. She'd liked the message. She'd read her brother's words, words that erased me from their lives, and she'd clicked that little blue thumbs up as casually as if he'd posted a funny meme. If you've ever been told you're no longer wanted by the people you gave your entire life to, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. It's not like a breakup. It's not like getting fired. It's like looking in the mirror and discovering you've become invisible. Like you've been slowly fading for years and nobody bothered to tell you until you were already a ghost. Before I tell you what I did next, and trust me, you'll want to hear this, let me just say, if you've ever felt thrown away by your own family, if you've ever wondered how betrayal from your own children could happen, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Because this story, what happened after that message, it's going to hit different. And if stories like this, real stories about real pain and real revenge, are what you need right now, make sure you check the description box below. There are more stories there, stories that might make you feel less alone in whatever you're going through. I sat there in my kitchen, in my empty house that used to overflow with their noise and mess and life, and I made myself read the message again. And again. I needed to understand how I'd gotten here. How the woman who'd sacrificed everything, and I mean everything, had become the villain in her own children's story. It started, I suppose, with Richard. My ex-husband. Their father. Though calling him a father feels generous considering he spent their childhood working 70-hour weeks and their teenage years working on his secretary. But when he left, when he walked out on 18 years of marriage for a woman barely older than Trevor, he'd done something brilliant. Something I didn't recognize as warfare at the time. He'd started a campaign. Quiet. Subtle. A whisper here, a carefully worded concern there. Your mother seems stressed. Maybe you should give her space. Your mother's been different lately. Have you noticed? I worry about her state of mind. He'd planted seeds. And over the next 15 years, while I was busy actually raising them, putting Trevor through college, helping Emma recover from her darkest days, being the one who showed up, always, without fail, those seeds had been growing roots. Deep, tangled roots that twisted around every memory, recoloring the past, rewriting the narrative until I became the problem. The difficult one. The one causing damage. The meatloaf tasted like cardboard now. Or maybe that was just my mouth. I couldn't feel much of anything except a strange, detached numbness spreading through my body like Novocaine. I kept thinking about Trevor's choice of words. Concluded. Like they'd had meetings about me. Like I was a business problem requiring consensus. Had they gathered without me? Had Richard been there? Had they listed my crimes on a whiteboard? Taken a vote? I scrolled up through our previous messages. There weren't many. Our communication had dwindled over the past year to birthday wishes and holiday logistics. The last real conversation we'd had was 4 months ago, when I'd asked why I hadn't been invited to Trevor's son's birthday party. Just keeping it small this year, Mom, he'd said. I'd believed him. I'd even sent a gift card and a heartfelt message telling little Jackson happy birthday from Grandma. I'd never received a thank you. Before that, it was Emma asking to borrow money for her car payment. I'd sent it immediately, no questions asked. She'd never paid it back. Never even acknowledged receiving it after a quick "got it, thanks." The pattern was there. I could see it now, in the cold light of this moment. The slow withdrawal. The decreasing warmth. The increasing distance. I'd explained it away as them being busy, being adults with their own lives. I told myself it was natural, normal. I'd swallowed my hurt and kept reaching out, kept trying, kept hoping that if I just gave them enough space, enough understanding, enough unconditional love, they'd eventually come back to me. I'd been wrong. My finger hovered over the reply button. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to defend myself. To remind them of every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar I'd stretched and every dream I'd deferred. To ask them how they could do this, how they could be so cruel, how they could throw me away like garbage after everything I'd given them. But I didn't write that message. Instead, I opened my banking app. My hands had stopped shaking. Something cold and clear had settled over me, like ice forming on a winter lake. I looked at the list of recurring payments. Autopay to Trevor's mortgage, $500 a month, every month, for the past 3 years since he'd hit a rough patch and asked for temporary help that had somehow become permanent. Autopay to Emma's car insurance, $240 a month because she said she'd pay me back and I'd wanted to help her build her credit. The family cell phone plan, both their numbers were on it, had been for years, because it was easier and cheaper to keep them on mine. $180 a month. Then there was the Netflix account, the Spotify family plan, the Amazon Prime that they used constantly. I added it up. $920. Every single month. $11,040 a year. And that wasn't counting the birthday gifts, the Christmas presents, the emergency loans that were never repaid, the groceries I'd buy and drop off because I knew Emma struggled to afford food, the clothes I'd buy for the grandchildren. I'd been funding their lives while they'd been planning to erase me from theirs. At 11:58, I started cancelling. One by one. Each click felt like pulling a thread, watching something unravel. The mortgage payment. Cancelled. The car insurance. Cancelled. The phone plan. I felt a small pang there, thinking about losing access to those numbers, but I pushed through it. Cancelled. By midnight, I dismantled every financial connection between us. Then I typed my reply. Short. Simple. Devastating. Thanks for confirming. I'll cancel all the auto payments. I hit send at 12:03 a.m. And then I waited. The response came faster than I expected. By 12:07, my phone was exploding. Trevor first, what are you talking about? Then Emma, Mom, what payments? Then Trevor again, you can't just cancel everything. We have bills. And Emma, this is so typical of you. Making everything about money. I watched the messages pile up, and I felt nothing. That coldness had spread through my entire body now. I was frozen solid. Unreachable. For the first time in 34 years of being their mother, I didn't rush to fix their problem. I didn't explain or defend or apologize. I just watched their panic unfold on my screen like a show I was no longer starring in. At 12:23, Trevor called. I declined it. He called again. Declined. Emma called. Declined. Then a call from a number I didn't recognize. Probably Richard, probably already pulled into the drama, probably ready to tell me I was being unreasonable. Declined. I turned off my phone. The kitchen was so quiet now. Just me and the ticking clock and the half-eaten meatloaf. I sat there in that silence and felt something shifting inside me. Something that had been bent and broken for so long I'd forgotten it existed. Something like a spine. Like a sense of self. Like rage. They'd concluded I was no longer their mother. Fine. Then I was no longer their ATM. No longer their safety net. No longer their emotional support animal, there to absorb their cruelty and keep giving anyway. I was free. At least, that's what I told myself as I sat alone in my kitchen at 1 in the morning, crying into cold meatloaf, wondering how love could turn into this. I didn't sleep. How could I? I lay in bed staring at my ceiling, tracing the familiar crack that ran from the light fixture to the corner window, the one I'd been meaning to fix for 3 years. Richard used to handle things like that. After he left, I'd learned to handle most things myself: plumbing, electrical work, lawn care. But some things I'd just let go. Some cracks I'd learned to live with. Now I wondered if that had been a metaphor I'd been too stupid to read. The sun came up anyway, indifferent to my devastation. Light filtered through the curtains, turning everything pale blue, then pink, then gold. I watched the colors change and felt ancient. 62 years old, and I'd somehow ended up more alone than I'd ever been. Even during the divorce, even during those brutal months when Richard was dividing our life into itemized categories and lawyers were attaching price tags to memories, I'd had the kids. They'd been angry at their father, protective of me. United front. Team mom. When had that changed? And how had I not noticed it changing? My phone was still off. I'd plugged it in around 2 a.m., but I hadn't turned it back on. Part of me wanted to leave it off forever, to just disappear into a life where I didn't have to see their messages, didn't have to know what they thought of me. But I wasn't that person. For better or worse, I was a woman who faced things head-on. Even things that destroyed me. At 7:30, I made coffee. My hands were steadier than they'd been last night. The shock had worn off, leaving behind something harder, clearer. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped Trevor with his algebra homework, where Emma had cried over her first breakup, where we'd eaten thousands of meals as a family, and I turned on my phone. 63 messages. 22 missed calls. I scrolled through them slowly, clinically, like I was studying evidence. Trevor's messages progressed from confused to angry to desperate. You can't be serious. We need to talk about this. The mortgage payment is due in 3 days. You're really going to do this? Fine. This just proves what we've been saying about you. That last one made me laugh. A sharp, bitter sound that echoed in my empty kitchen. I'd proved what they'd been saying. By refusing to fund them after they'd disowned me, I'd somehow confirmed that I deserved to be disowned. Emma's messages were different. More manipulative. Mom, I don't understand why you're being like this. We were just trying to set boundaries. You're hurting us. What about Jackson and Lily? You're their grandmother. How can you do this to them? And then, buried in the middle, Dad said you'd react like this. He said you'd make it about money because you always do. There it was. Richard's voice, filtered through Emma's mouth. How long had he been in her ear? How many conversations had they had about me? Conversations where he'd painted me as the mercenary, the one who kept score, the one who couldn't let things go. I'd let everything go. That was the problem. I'd let go of my dignity, my self-respect, my right to be treated with basic human decency. I'd let them take and take and take because that's what mothers do, right? We give. We sacrifice. We love unconditionally. We prove our worth through our willingness to be used up completely. I opened my laptop and pulled up my bank statements. I needed to see it in black and white. Needed to understand exactly what I'd been doing. I went back 5 years, as far as the online records went, and started a spreadsheet. Every payment to Trevor. Every payment to Emma. Every gift, every loan, every just this once, Mom that had turned into a pattern. By 9 a.m., I had my answer. $73,812. I stared at that number for a long time. $73,000. I'd been a teacher for 34 years before I'd retired, and I was living on a pension and Social Security. I didn't have money to throw around. Every dollar I'd given them was a dollar I'd saved by not eating out, not traveling, not buying myself anything beyond necessities. My car was 12 years old. My furniture was older than that. I'd been wearing the same winter coat for 8 years because I told myself I didn't need a new one yet. But I'd sent $500 a month to Trevor because he'd asked. And he'd responded to my pain by telling me not to come to Thanksgiving. I took a screenshot of the spreadsheet. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I posted it on Facebook. Not as an attack. I didn't tag them. I didn't name them. I just posted the numbers with a simple caption. A lesson learned too late, you can't buy love. You can't earn respect through sacrifice. And when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. I knew they'd see it. We were Facebook friends. We weren't anything else anymore, apparently, but we were still Facebook friends. And I knew Richard would see it. And their friends would see it. And questions would be asked. Let them answer those questions. Let them explain to their friends why they'd disowned the woman who'd been funding their lives. My phone rang again. Trevor. I answered this time. What the hell, Mom? His voice was tight with fury. Not hurt. Not confusion. Just pure anger. You posted our private business on Facebook. Our private business. My voice came out calm. Too calm. The calm of someone who'd burned through panic and landed in a place beyond caring. Is that what you call it? I call it a public service announcement. Let me save you some time. Trevor. Yes, I posted it. Yes, everyone can see it. And no, I'm not taking it down. You're insane. Do you know that? This is exactly why Why you what? Why you concluded I'm no longer your mother. That's an interesting phrase, by the way. Concluded. Like you've been deliberating. How long have you been having these meetings about me? How long have you been building your case? Silence. I'd surprised him. Good. Was your father there? I pressed. During these discussions about how terrible I am? Let me guess, he had some thoughts on my character. This has nothing to do with Dad. Everything has to do with your father, Trevor. Everything. He walked out on this family, but somehow I'm the villain. He abandoned you when you were 16, but I'm the one who caused too much damage. Do you know what's funny? Not funny haha, but funny in that way that makes you want to scream. I spent years defending him to you. Years. When you were angry at him, I told you he was doing his best. When he forgot your birthday or missed your games or cancelled plans, I made excuses. I spent years trying to protect his relationship with you, and this is what I get. You can't make this about him. This is about you. About your behavior. About the way you. Tell me exactly what I did. My voice was steel now. Tell me specifically. What behavior are you talking about? Another silence. Longer this time. You're negative, he finally said. You're always complaining. Always making us feel guilty. Always playing the victim. When did I complain, Trevor? When did I make you feel guilty? Give me one example. One specific time when I played the victim. It's a pattern, Mom. It's a feeling. You just make everything heavy. Being around you is exhausting. Being around me was exhausting. I'd spent 34 years exhausting myself for him, and being around me was exhausting. Okay, I said quietly. Thank you for your honesty. So you'll take down the post? No, Mom. I'm not your mom anymore, remember? You concluded that last night. So you don't get to call me Mom. You don't get to tell me what to do. And you definitely don't get $500 a month anymore. Your mortgage payment is due in 3 days? That sounds like a you problem now. I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but it was different this time. Not fear. Not shock. Something fiercer. Something that felt almost like power. The Facebook post started getting comments. Friends I hadn't talked to in years. Are you okay? What happened? Sending love. One comment from my friend Patricia, who'd known the kids since they were babies. Some children forget what their mothers sacrificed. I'm sorry you're going through this. Then I saw it. A comment from Richard's sister, Judith. We'd never been close, but we'd been polite for years. Family. Her comment said, there are always two sides to every story. Maybe some self-reflection is in order. The rage that moved through me was clean and bright. I clicked on Judith's profile. Her header photo was from Trevor's wedding 3 years ago. A photo I wasn't in, I realized now, looking at it with fresh eyes. I'd been at the wedding, of course. I'd paid for half of it. But somehow I'd been cropped out of the family photo they'd chosen to commemorate the day. I'd been disappearing for years. I just hadn't noticed. I typed a reply to Judith, then deleted it. Then typed it again. Then deleted it again. Finally, I settled on, you're absolutely right. There are always two sides. Feel free to ask your nephew how much his side of the story cost me. Petty? Maybe. But I was done being the bigger person. Being the bigger person had gotten me disowned. By noon, Emma called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Mom. She was crying. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to make us look bad? I posted numbers, Emma. That's all. If those numbers make you look bad, maybe you should examine why. You're trying to turn everyone against us. I don't need to turn anyone against you. I'm not campaigning. I'm not calling people. I'm not telling stories. I posted a spreadsheet. The truth doesn't need my help. It's not that simple, and you know it. Context matters. Okay. Give me context. Explain to me the context that makes it okay to take $73,000 from someone and then tell them they're no longer your mother. We never asked you for that much. We never knew it added up like that. You never added it up because you never had to. I just kept giving because that's what I thought mothers did. Turns out I was wrong. Turns out I was just making it easy for you to use me. That's not fair. Those words, that's not fair, coming from her, after everything, they broke something in me. Some last vestige of patience or mercy or motherly instinct. Fair. My voice rose. I couldn't help it. You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about fair, Emma. Let's talk about the 2 years I spent driving you to therapy 3 times a week when you were 17. Let's talk about the nights I slept on the floor next to your bed because you were afraid to be alone. Let's talk about how I put my career on hold to homeschool you because the regular classroom was triggering your anxiety. Let's talk about how I defended you when your father called you dramatic and said you were making up problems for attention. Let's talk about how I took out a second mortgage on this house to pay for your inpatient treatment because our insurance wouldn't cover it. Let's talk about fair. She was silent. I could hear her breathing, ragged and wet. I never asked you to do those things, she whispered. And there it was. The truth that had been lurking under everything. She'd never asked. She'd just expected. They'd both just expected. Expected me to give and sacrifice and fund and support and then disappear quietly when I was no longer useful. Expected me to accept my dismissal with grace. You're right, I said. You never asked. I volunteered. I thought that's what love looked like. But I'm learning now that I was wrong about a lot of things. Including what you and your brother are capable of. I'm not Trevor, she said. I just liked his message. I didn't write it. That's somehow worse, Emma. You read those words designed to destroy me, and you gave them your approval. You co-signed my erasure. At least Trevor had the courage to do his own dirty work. I'm sorry. She was really crying now. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean, I wasn't thinking. That's the problem. You weren't thinking. Neither of you has thought about me as an actual person in years. I'm just a resource. An ATM with emotions you have to occasionally manage. Well, the ATM is closed, Emma. Permanently. Don't do this. Please. Can we meet? Can we talk in person? Why? So you can look me in the eye while you explain why I deserve to be thrown away? I'll pass. I love you, Mom. Those words. Those 3 words I'd said to her 10,000 times. 10,000 times I'd said them first, said them last, said them in the middle of arguments and at the end of bad days and during those awful quiet moments when I knew she needed to hear them even if she couldn't say them back. Now she said them. Now that the money stopped. Now that the consequences landed. Now she loved me. Do you? I asked. Do you actually love me, Emma? Or do you love what I provide? That's not. Because love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't disown people by text message. Love doesn't give a thumbs up to cruelty. Love doesn't take $73,000 and ask for more. It's not about money. Then why did everything change when I stopped paying? Why are you calling me now? Why do you suddenly want to meet? She didn't have an answer for that. I have to go, I said. I have things to do. Like what? Like figure out who I am when I'm not being your mother, I thought. Like remember what I wanted before I spent my entire adult life wanting things for you. Like learn how to live with this hole in my chest where you used to be. But I didn't say any of that. I just said, goodbye, Emma, and hung up. The house felt impossibly quiet after that. I wandered through rooms that still held their history. Trevor's bedroom that I'd kept exactly as he'd left it, Emma's drawings still taped to the refrigerator even though she was 31 years old. Evidence of a life I'd believed we were living together. Evidence that I'd been living it alone. I thought about the message. We've finally concluded that you're no longer our mother. I hadn't been their mother in years, I realized now. I'd been their sponsor. Their benefactor. Their emergency fund. But a mother would have been invited to birthdays. A mother would have been included in photos. A mother would have been told she was loved without prompting, without crisis, without conditions. This was day one of my new life. A life where I was no longer their mother. I should have felt devastated. And part of me did. But another part of me felt something else. Something dangerous and dark and unexpectedly exhilarating. I felt free. The Facebook post went viral, at least by my standards. 200 comments. 50 shares. Messages from people I'd lost touch with years ago. People who suddenly wanted to know the story behind the numbers. I didn't respond to most of them. What was there to say? My children had shown me exactly how much my love was worth. $73,000, apparently, and not a penny more. But I couldn't stop thinking about Trevor's words during our phone call. You're negative. Always complaining. Always playing the victim. Those accusations had been so confident, so certain, like he'd been practicing them. Like someone had given him the script. I needed to understand when the narrative shifted. When I'd gone from hero to villain in their story. I spent that afternoon digging through old emails and text messages, building a timeline. It was masochistic, probably. Like pressing on a bruise to see how much it could hurt. But I needed to see the pattern. Needed to understand what I'd missed while I was busy being their mother. The first crack appeared 3 years ago, right after Trevor's wedding. I'd found the email thread buried in my archives. It was from Richard's new wife, Carolyn. Subject line, Family Dynamics. Dear Margaret, it began, formal, distant, as if we were colleagues instead of connected by the children we'd raised. Richard and I have been discussing the family situation, and we feel it's important to address some concerns. The children have confided in us that they're finding your expectations difficult to manage. Trevor specifically mentioned feeling pressured to maintain a relationship that feels forced. Emma has expressed similar feelings. We think it might be beneficial for everyone if you took a step back and allowed them space to come to you on their own terms. We're saying this out of love and concern for everyone's well-being. Out of love. I remembered receiving that email. Remembered the gut punch of reading it. I'd responded carefully, diplomatically, asking for specific examples of my supposedly oppressive behavior. I'd gotten nothing back. Just silence. And because I was trying to be respectful of their space, trying not to be the difficult ex-wife, I'd let it go. I'd backed off. Started waiting for them to reach out first. Started measuring my messages, my calls, my need for connection against their apparent need for distance. That's when the $500 monthly payments to Trevor had started. I could see it now in my bank records. The wedding was in June. The first payment was in August. He'd called me, stressed about mortgage payments after the honeymoon expenses. Just until we get back on our feet, Mom. 3 months, maybe 4. I'd said yes immediately. What kind of mother wouldn't? The payments never stopped. I'd never asked them to. He'd never offered. I found another email, this one from a year later. Emma to me, copied to Trevor. Mom, we wanted to address something that's been bothering us. At Jackson's baptism, you made several comments about not seeing the baby enough. It made Michelle, Trevor's wife, uncomfortable. We need you to understand that we have boundaries now. We're adults. We have our own families. We can't revolve our lives around your need for connection. My need for connection. Like it was pathological. Like wanting to see my grandson was an imposition rather than natural, normal grandmotherly love. I remembered that baptism. Remembered standing in the church, watching them pass Jackson around to everyone except me. I'd made a joke about it. Guess I'll have to wait my turn. Trying to keep it light, trying not to make them feel bad. That joke, apparently, had been translated into inappropriate pressure. My hurt feelings had become their burden. The pattern was clear now. Every time I'd expressed a need, to see them, to be included, to matter, it had been reframed as me being demanding. Every time I'd shown hurt, it had been used as evidence of my toxicity. And Richard's voice was woven through all of it. I could see that now. Richard, who'd always been a master at rewriting history, at making his failures into everyone else's problems. He'd spent our entire marriage telling me I was too sensitive, too emotional, too needy. When he'd had his affair, he'd somehow made it about my inadequacies. You were always so focused on the kids, he'd said during one of our final fights. You didn't have anything left for me. As if his infidelity was my fault. As if I should have apologized for prioritizing our children over his ego. He'd left me, but he'd never really let go. He'd just changed tactics. Instead of controlling me directly, he'd learned to control how the children saw me. Every doubt he'd planted, every criticism he'd whispered, every story he'd told where I was the problem, they'd all taken root over the years, growing into this moment where my own children could look me in the eye and tell me I was no longer their mother. I found Trevor's Instagram. I'd stopped checking it months ago because seeing the life he shared publicly, the life that didn't include me, hurt too much. But I looked now with different eyes. I scrolled back 3 years. Photo after photo of family gatherings I hadn't been invited to. Birthday parties. Sunday dinners. Holiday celebrations. And there, in so many of them, was Richard. Richard with his arm around Trevor. Richard holding Jackson. Richard and Carolyn at the head of the table, playing grandparents, playing family, filling the space I'd been erased from. One photo stopped me cold. It was from last Thanksgiving. The caption read, "Grateful for family, old and new. Thanks Dad for always being there." The photo showed Trevor, Emma, Richard, Carolyn, Trevor's wife Michelle, Emma's boyfriend, and the grandchildren. They were all wearing matching shirts, some inside joke I wasn't part of. They looked happy. They looked complete. I hadn't been invited to that Thanksgiving. Trevor had told me they were keeping it small, just them and Michelle's parents. I'd spent the day alone, eating a Trader Joe's turkey breast for one, telling myself it was fine, they were building their own traditions. He'd lied. They'd all lied. There had been a family Thanksgiving. I just wasn't family anymore. I should have stopped looking. I didn't. I found Emma's Facebook, scrolled through her photos. More of the same. Sunday brunches with Dad. Shopping trips with Carolyn. Photos tagged family time that didn't include me. And in the comments, Richard played the doting father. "Love you, sweetheart. So proud of you. Let's do this again soon." Where had this version of Richard been when they were children? Where was the doting father when Trevor needed help with his science project and I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. building a volcano? Where was the proud parent when Emma had her first art show and I'd been the only one who'd shown up? He'd been too busy working, too busy building his career, too busy, eventually, sleeping with his secretary. But now he was Father of the Year. Now he showed up. Now he had time. And somehow I was the problem. I called Patricia. My oldest friend, the only person who'd known me before I became Trevor and Emma's mother. She answered on the second ring. "I saw the post," she said before I could speak. "Are you okay?" "I don't know what okay means anymore," I said. "Pat, tell me the truth. Have I been a terrible mother? Have I been this negative, complaining person they say I am?" "What? No. Margaret, no. You've been, God, you've been a saint. You gave up everything for those kids." Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I gave up too much. Maybe they can't respect me because I never respected myself enough to have boundaries. That's not your fault. You loved them. That's what you were supposed to do. But when does love become enabling? When does sacrifice become just letting yourself be used? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you remember when Emma was in treatment? When she was 19? "Of course. Richard called me once during that time. This was right after the divorce. He said, and I'm telling you this now because I think you need to hear it. He said he was worried about you becoming too enmeshed with Emma's problems. He said you were making her recovery about you. He said you needed therapy to learn how to let go." My blood ran cold. "He said that to you?" "Yeah. And I told him he was full of shit. I told him Emma was alive because of you. Because you fought for her when everyone else, including him, wanted to write her off as dramatic. But Margaret, I think he's been saying this stuff to other people too. I think he's been building this narrative about you for years." "Why? Why would he do that?" "Because he's a narcissist. Because you left him, and narcissists can't handle being left. You think he gets to be the one who walked away? No. In his story, he rescued himself from your dysfunction. And he's spent years making sure everyone, including your kids, believes his version." It made a terrible kind of sense. Richard had always needed to be the hero. In his story, he couldn't be the villain who'd abandoned his family for a younger woman. So he'd rewritten the script. In his version, I was the problem. I was the reason the marriage failed. I was the toxic parent. He was the savior, gathering up his wounded children and teaching them to set healthy boundaries with their crazy mother. "I've lost them," I said. "They're gone, Pat. And I don't know if I can ever get them back." "Maybe you don't want them back. Not like this. Not while they're like this." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe I didn't want them back. Not the versions of them that could discard me so easily. Not the people who could take my money and my love and my history and just throw it away. "I'm so tired," I said. "I'm so tired of trying to prove I deserve basic decency from my own children." "Then stop proving. Stop trying. Let them sit with what they've done." After we hung up, I sat with her advice. Let them sit with what they've done. The problem was, they didn't think they'd done anything wrong. In their minds, they were the victims. I was the aggressor. They'd set healthy boundaries, and I'd retaliated financially. That's how they'd tell this story. That's how Richard would help them tell it. Unless I changed the narrative. I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a Facebook post this time. Something longer. Something comprehensive. A document that laid out the full history, not to blast them publicly, but for me. To organize my thoughts. To see it all in one place. I titled it, A Mother's Accounting. I wrote through dinner, through sunset, through the time when I'd normally call Emma to say goodnight even though she rarely answered. I documented everything. Every sacrifice, yes, but more importantly, every lie. Every gathering I'd been excluded from. Every time they told me something was small and intimate and I'd later discovered it was large and full, just full of everyone except me. I wrote about the money, but I also wrote about the emotional economy. The constant anxiety of wondering if I was too much or not enough. The way I'd learned to minimize my needs, to apologize for existing, to be grateful for scraps of attention. The way I'd let them train me to accept less and less until I was accepting nothing at all. By midnight, I had 23 pages. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. But seeing it all written out, seeing the pattern of manipulation and erasure stretched across years, something crystallized in me. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about me. About reclaiming my own story. About refusing to be the villain in a narrative I didn't write. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Michelle. Trevor's wife. We need to talk." I stared at the message. Michelle, who'd been uncomfortable with my comments about not seeing Jackson enough. Michelle, who'd somehow become the gatekeeper between me and my son. Michelle, who I'd bent over backward to welcome into the family, who I'd defended when Trevor complained about her spending, who I'd sent thoughtful gifts to, tried to bond with, tried to love as a daughter. "No," I typed back. "We don't. You're destroying this family." I laughed out loud. Alone in my kitchen at midnight, I laughed until tears ran down my face. I was destroying this family. Me. The one who'd held it together through Richard's betrayal, through Emma's illness, through every crisis and drama and problem. I was the destroyer. The family was destroyed when they sent that message. I wrote back. "I'm just refusing to fund the rubble." "You're being vindictive." "I'm being honest. There's a difference." Trevor is stressed. The mortgage is Trevor's problem now. He's an adult. He has a job. He'll figure it out. We have a child. You're hurting your grandson by doing this. And there it was. The nuclear option. Using Jackson as leverage. Making me responsible for Trevor's financial choices because if I didn't pay, the baby would suffer. Never mind that Trevor made 6 figures as an engineer. Never mind that they'd just come back from a vacation in Maui that I'd seen photos of on Instagram. Never mind that Michelle's purse in those photos cost more than my monthly grocery budget. My grandson, I wrote slowly, carefully, is being hurt by having parents who think his grandmother is an ATM. I'm teaching him something valuable, actually. I'm teaching him that love isn't transactional. That you can't treat people like garbage and expect them to keep giving. That actions have consequences. You should thank me. You're a bitter old woman. There it was. The mask off. The truth of what they really thought of me. "I'm a woman who finally learned her worth," I replied. "And it's more than you people were willing to pay." I blocked the number. Then I blocked Trevor's number. Then Emma's. Then Richard's. One by one, I severed the digital threads that connected us. Each block felt like cutting a rope that had been strangling me. Each one hurt. But each one also felt necessary. Surgical. I couldn't heal if they kept having access to wound me. The next morning, I woke up to an email from a lawyer. Richard's lawyer. The subject line, regarding harassment and defamation. I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity won. Dear Ms. Harrison, it began. Formal. Threatening. It has come to my attention that you have posted private financial information on social media in an attempt to damage the reputations of your adult children. This constitutes harassment and potentially defamation. We request that you immediately remove all posts related to Trevor Harrison and Emma Harrison, and that you cease all contact with both individuals. Failure to comply may result in legal action, including a restraining order. I read it twice. Then I called Patricia. They're threatening to get a restraining order against me, I said. Richard got a lawyer. Of course he did. Can he actually do that? I don't know. I posted facts. Numbers. Is truth defamation? You need your own lawyer, Margaret. She was right. I called a lawyer I'd used during the divorce, Barbara Chen. Wait, no. Barbara Morrison. She remembered me. She agreed to look at the letter, the Facebook post, everything. 2 days later, she called me back. They don't have a case, she said. You posted factual information from your own bank records. You didn't name them in the post. You didn't threaten them. And the only contact you've initiated since their message was to inform them of the cancelled payments, which is perfectly reasonable since you were paying for their services. They're trying to scare you into silence. Don't let them. So I can keep the post up? Absolutely. In fact, I think you should document everything. If they're going to claim harassment, you need a record showing the actual pattern of their behavior. Do you have the original message they sent you? The one where they disowned you? Yes. Save it. Screenshot it. Save every message, every email, every communication. If they try to take this further, you'll need evidence. After we hung up, I did exactly that. I created a folder on my computer, Evidence. I screenshot everything. The original message from Trevor. Emma's like. All the subsequent texts and calls. The threatening email from Richard's lawyer. The nasty message from Michelle. And then I did something else. I went back through my photos. Years of photos. Birthday parties I'd thrown. Holidays I'd hosted. School events I'd attended alone because Richard was always too busy. I created a second folder, The Real Story. Every photo of me with the kids. Every handmade Mother's Day card they'd given me. Every I love you, Mom text from years past. Every piece of evidence that contradicted their current narrative. Every proof that I'd been a good mother, a present mother, a loving mother. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it all yet. But I was building my case. Not for court. For history. For truth. That afternoon, I got a call from Trevor's number. I'd blocked it, so it went straight to voicemail. He left a message. I told myself I wouldn't listen to it. I listened anyway. Mom. His voice was different. Strained. Look, this has gotten out of hand. I didn't want it to go this far. Can we please just talk? Please? I'm asking you to call me back. We need to fix this. We need to fix this. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just we need to fix this. Like I was equally responsible for the destruction. Like my crime was equivalent to theirs. I didn't call back. But I saved the voicemail. Added it to the evidence folder. If you're still watching, if you've stuck with me through this painful unraveling of my life, thank you. I know this isn't easy to hear. It's not easy to live. But I'm telling you this because I need you to understand what came next. I need you to understand why I did what I did. Check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about people who reached their breaking point and had to decide who they were going to be on the other side of betrayal. Because here's what I was learning. There's a point in every relationship where you have to decide if you're going to keep participating in your own diminishment. A point where you have to choose between peace and dignity. I'd spent years choosing peace. Choosing to overlook, to forgive, to accommodate. Choosing to make myself smaller so they could feel bigger. I was done making myself small. The question was, what did big look like? What did a woman do when her children tried to erase her? When her ex-husband tried to legally silence her? When the family she'd built with her own blood and bone and years of her life decided she was disposable? I didn't know yet. But I was about to find out. For 3 weeks, I lived in silence. No calls to the kids. No texts. No attempts to bridge the chasm they'd created. I'd blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, and created what Patricia called a protective perimeter. It felt less like protection and more like amputation, cutting off parts of myself that were diseased, yes, but still mine. Still attached to my heart. But silence, I learned, is its own kind of language. And mine was apparently saying something they couldn't ignore. The messages came through other channels. Through my sister, Linda, who lived in Oregon and had stayed carefully neutral during the divorce. Margaret, the kids are worried about you. Trevor says you won't answer his calls. He says you're not well. Not well. That was Rich. I wasn't complying, so clearly I was unwell. Through my old neighbor, Diane, who still lived 2 doors down from the house Richard and I had raised the kids in. Emma stopped by asking if I'd heard from you. She seemed upset. Said something about you going through something. Going through something. Like this was a phase. Like maternal grief was something I'd recover from with rest and fluids. Through Father Michael at the church I'd stopped attending 6 months ago when I realized I was only going because Emma sometimes went, and I was hoping to run into her. Your daughter came to see me. She's concerned about your mental state. She mentioned some troubling behavior. I told her I'd reach out. Mental state. Troubling behavior. They were building a narrative, and in this one, I wasn't angry, I was crazy. I called Barbara, my lawyer. They're doing exactly what I predicted, she said. They're trying to establish that you're unstable. If they can get enough people on record saying they're worried about you, they can potentially use it as evidence for an involuntary psychiatric hold. They can do that. If they can convince a judge you're a danger to yourself or others. It's a stretch, but with enough coordinated concern from family members, it's possible. I've seen vindictive families weaponize the mental health system before. I felt something cold slide down my spine. So what do? You keep living your life. Normally. Visibly. You maintain your routines. You stay connected to friends. You do not isolate. And you document every single attempt they make to paint you as unstable. Every message that comes through a third party. Every implication that you're not well. Because if they try this, we'll bury them with evidence of their campaign. I started documenting. I created a shared Google Doc with Barbara and began logging every contact. Every flying monkey they sent. Every concerned message that was really just surveillance. The pattern became obvious quickly. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about what I might do next. What I might say. How I might continue to damage the carefully constructed image they'd built. Then my pension check didn't arrive. I'd set up direct deposit years ago, and the money always appeared on the first of the month like clockwork. On April 1st, my bank account showed no deposit. I checked my email. Nothing from the pension board. I called. Mrs. Harrison? Yes, we tried to reach you. There's been a hold placed on your account pending an investigation. An investigation into what? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but a family member contacted us with concerns about potential financial exploitation. They suggested someone might be accessing your account fraudulently. We're required by law to freeze the account until we can verify. Who called? But I already knew. I can't disclose that information. But you'll need to come to our office with identification and proof of address. We'll also need to interview you to assess. To assess my mental competency. A pause. To ensure the account is secure. I hung up and immediately called Barbara. They're escalating, she said. This is financial abuse. They're trying to cut off your resources. Can they do this? They can try. And unfortunately, elder financial abuse is taken seriously, as it should be, which means the pension board has to investigate. But this is going to backfire on them spectacularly. How? Because you're going to that office tomorrow with me. We're going to bring your bank statements showing the $73,000 you paid them. We're going to bring the text message where they disowned you. We're going to show exactly who's been exploiting whom. And then we're going to file a police report for filing a false report. The next day, we sat in a beige office across from a bureaucrat named Harold something who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Barbara laid out the evidence like a prosecutor. The message from Trevor. The payment history. The timeline showing the payments stopped only after they'd disowned me. So you're saying, Harold said slowly, that your children took money from you for years, then cut you off, and are now claiming you're being exploited? That's exactly what I'm saying. He looked at the documents for a long time. Then he picked up his phone. I need to make a call. I'll be right back. When he returned 20 minutes later, his expression had changed. Mrs. Harrison, your account will be unfrozen by end of business today. I apologize for the inconvenience. And I'll be noting in our records that this complaint appears to have been filed in bad faith. If there are any future complaints, they'll be viewed with skepticism. Can you tell me who filed the complaint? Your son, Trevor Harrison. He claimed he was concerned about unusual account activity and that you weren't answering his calls to verify the charges. Of course it was Trevor. Trevor, who'd taken $500 a month for 3 years. Trevor, who was worried about the mortgage payment. Trevor, who'd apparently decided that if I wouldn't fund him voluntarily, he'd try to gain access to my money another way. We filed the police report that afternoon. The officer who took our statement looked grim. I see this more than you'd think, he said. Adult children who feel entitled to their parents' money. Sometimes it's greed. Sometimes they're genuinely convinced they know better how to manage their parents' finances. Either way, it's abuse. Will anything happen to him? Probably not. First offense, no actual financial loss to you. But it'll be on record. If he tries anything else, we'll have a pattern. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with a glass of wine I wasn't drinking and thought about the word, abuse. I'd been thinking of this as betrayal, as abandonment, as cruelty. But abuse was more accurate. They were abusing me. Using the system, using other people, using every lever they could find to control, punish, and silence me. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mom. Emma's voice. She was calling from someone else's phone. Mom, please don't hang up. I should have. I didn't. What do you want, Emma? I want to explain. I want you to understand. Understand what? Understand that your brother tried to freeze my pension? Understand that you're telling people I'm mentally unstable? Understand that you're conducting a whisper campaign to destroy my reputation? That's not. We're just worried about you. You're acting so different. So angry. I am angry. I have every right to be angry. But this isn't you, Mom. This vindictive, cold person posting our business online and cutting us off, that's not the mother I know. Maybe you never knew me. Maybe the mother you knew was a doormat. Maybe I was so busy being what you needed that I forgot to be a person. But I'm a person now, Emma. A person with boundaries and self-respect and a very clear understanding of how I deserve to be treated. We want to work this out. Trevor and I, we've been talking. We think maybe we all overreacted. Oh, you overreacted? By disowning me? By telling me not to come to Thanksgiving? By having your father's lawyer threaten me? That was an overreaction. The lawyer thing wasn't our idea. That was Dad and Carolyn. They thought. I don't care what they thought. You're 31 years old, Emma. At some point, you have to stop letting Daddy tell you what to think about your mother. Silence. Long enough that I thought she'd hung up. He didn't, she started. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Make it make sense. You weren't happy, Mom. After the divorce, you were always so sad. Always talking about being lonely. Always needing reassurance. It was exhausting. Dad and Carolyn, they're just lighter. Easier. Being around them doesn't feel like work. There it was. The truth beneath the truth. I'd been sad after my husband left me for another woman. I'd been lonely after my children grew up and moved out. I'd needed reassurance that I still mattered. And that had been exhausting for them. Being around me, being my comfort, bearing witness to my pain. That was work they didn't want to do. So you chose easy, I said quietly. You chose the people who make you laugh over the person who cried. You chose the shiny new family over the broken old one. You chose comfort over loyalty. That's not fair. Fair? Emma, honey, nothing about this is fair. What's not fair is that I held you through every panic attack and paid for your treatment and slept on hospital floors for you, but you couldn't handle me being sad. What's not fair is that I gave you everything I had, and you gave me up because I made you uncomfortable. You're twisting everything. I'm telling the truth. Maybe for the first time. Maybe that's what's really bothering you, not that I'm being vindictive, but that I'm being honest. I miss you, she whispered. I miss my mom. Your mom is right here. But she's not the same person anymore. That person, the one who would have forgiven you by now, who would have already sent you money and apologized for being upset. She's gone, Emma. You killed her with that text message. What's left is someone different. Someone you might not like very much. But she's the one who's going to survive this. I hung up. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I felt clear. Like I'd finally said what needed to be said. Like I'd finally stopped apologizing for existing. The next week, I found out about the GoFundMe. Patricia called me, her voice tight with rage. Tell me you've seen it. Tell me you know. Know what? Trevor started a GoFundMe. Help my family during a difficult time. It's raised $4,000 so far. My vision went spotty. He did what? The description says your family is going through financial hardship because of unexpected loss of support. It doesn't name you, but it strongly implies you're the problem. People are leaving comments. Praying for you. Family is everything. So sorry your mother is doing this to you. Margaret, people are giving him money because they think you're abusing him. I pulled up the page on my laptop. There it was. Trevor's smiling family photo. Jackson on his shoulders. The description carefully worded to make them sound like victims. We're facing unexpected financial challenges after a family member withdrew support without warning. We're asking for help while we get back on our feet. Anything helps. Thank you for your prayers. $4,200 raised. 56 donors. Comments full of sympathy and outrage on his behalf. I screenshot everything. Sent it to Barbara. Her response came back in minutes. This is fraud. He's soliciting donations under false pretenses. Let me handle this. 2 days later, the GoFundMe was gone. Barbara had contacted the platform with evidence of Trevor's income, his social media showing recent expensive purchases and vacations, and the context of him cutting off his mother after years of financial support. They'd refunded all donations and banned him from the platform. But the damage was done. 56 people now believed I was a villain. 56 people had a story about Trevor, the poor victim of his cruel mother. The narrative was spreading beyond our family, beyond our circle, out into the world where I couldn't control it. That's when I decided to tell my side. Not on Facebook where I'd already been labeled vindictive. Somewhere bigger. Somewhere the story could reach people who didn't already have an opinion about me. I started a blog. I called it A Mother's Truth. And I started writing. The first blog post was the hardest thing I'd ever written. Harder than my thesis in graduate school. Harder than the letter I'd written Richard when I'd asked for a divorce. Harder than anything because I knew once I hit publish, there was no taking it back. The story would be out there. Permanent. Searchable. Real. I titled it, The Day My Children Disowned Me. I wrote it over the course of 4 days, editing and re-editing until every word felt true. Not angry. I'd learned that anger makes you sound unhinged, and I needed to sound sane. Measured. Credible. I wrote it the way I'd testify in court, just facts and feelings, letting readers draw their own conclusions. I included the text message. Screenshot, full and unedited. We've finally concluded that you're no longer our mother. I let those words speak for themselves. I included the payment history. Not the full $73,000, that felt like overkill, but a representative sample. 12 months of payments to Trevor. 12 months of payments to Emma. The dates they stopped, the reason why. I included context. My history of supporting them. Emma's illness and my role in her recovery. Trevor's childhood and how I'd raised him largely alone. The divorce and Richard's absence during their formative years. Not as attacks, just as facts that painted a fuller picture. And then I wrote about the aftermath. The lawyer's letter. The frozen pension. The GoFundMe. Every escalation, every attempt to silence or punish me for daring to stop funding my own erasure. I ended with a question. At what point does unconditional love become unconditional surrender? I didn't share it right away. I sat with it for 2 more days, reading and rereading, making sure it was fair, making sure it was true, making sure I could live with everyone knowing this about me, about them, about us. On a Sunday morning, I hit publish. Then I shared it on Facebook with a simple caption, "My story," for anyone who wants to understand what really happened. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 6 hours, the post had been shared 300 times. Within 24 hours, it had reached 10,000 people. The comments poured in, hundreds of them, from strangers across the country and around the world. "This happened to me too. My children did the same thing. Thank you for being brave enough to tell this story. You are not alone. But also, there must be more to this story. Adult children don't cut off good mothers. You're playing the victim." This is classic narcissistic behavior, writing this blog to manipulate public opinion. The criticism hurt. Of course it did. But it was drowned out by the wave of support from other parents, mostly mothers, who'd lived versions of my story, who'd given everything and been discarded, who'd funded their adult children's lives only to be cut off when they stopped being useful, who'd been called toxic for having feelings, unstable for setting boundaries, abusive for expecting basic respect. My inbox filled with messages. Women in their 60s and 70s sharing stories that made mine look mild. A woman whose daughter sued her for grandparents' rights after cutting her off. A man whose son had stolen his identity to open credit cards. A mother who'd been banned from her grandchildren's lives because she'd asked why they never said thank you. We were legion. An army of disposable parents, invisible in our grief, silent in our shame. The blog went viral in parenting forums, then in estrangement support groups, then in mainstream media. By the end of the week, I had interview requests from 3 podcasts, 2 online magazines, and a local news station. I said yes to all of them. Barbara advised against it. The more public you go, the more ammunition you give them. They'll use this as evidence of your instability. They'll say you're obsessed. Let them, I said. I'm done being silent. Silence is what let them win. The first interview was with a podcast called Family Fractures. The host, a therapist named Dr. Rachel Bennett, specialized in estrangement. She'd read my blog and wanted to dig deeper. "What do you think was the final straw for your children?" she asked. "What made them decide to cut contact?" I'd thought about this question for weeks. I think they'd been looking for an excuse for years. I think my ex-husband had been building a case against me, and they'd been collecting evidence. But honestly, I think the final straw was that I stopped pretending everything was okay. I started asking questions. Why wasn't I invited? Why didn't they call? Why did I always have to reach out first? The moment I stopped accepting crumbs and started expecting a seat at the table, I became the problem. Do you think they felt entitled to your financial support? Absolutely. And not just entitled, owed. Like my entire purpose was to serve them. When I stopped serving, I lost my value. What would you say to other parents going through this? I paused. This was the question I'd been waiting for. The reason I'd agreed to do this interview. I'd say stop blaming yourself. Stop trying to figure out what you did wrong. Sometimes you can do everything right and still be cast as the villain. Sometimes the problem isn't you, it's that you raised children who lack empathy or gratitude or basic decency. And that's not your fault. You can be a good mother and raise bad adults. Those 2 things can both be true. The podcast dropped on a Tuesday. By Thursday, it had 40,000 downloads. My blog traffic exploded. The second post I wrote, "The Financial Cost of Unconditional Love," was shared 10,000 times in the first day. Then Trevor responded. Not to me. He wouldn't speak to me directly. Instead, he wrote his own blog post on Medium. Title, "When Parents Weaponize Victimhood, A Son's Perspective." I read it with my heart pounding, sitting at my kitchen table with cold coffee and clenched fists. He portrayed me as manipulative, controlling, and emotionally abusive. He said I'd used money to maintain control over their lives, then withdrew it as punishment when they tried to set boundaries. He said my blog was a smear campaign designed to turn people against them. He said I'd always played the victim, always made everything about me, always required them to manage my emotions. He painted a picture of a mother who couldn't let go, who needed to be the center of attention, who'd made their childhoods about her needs rather than theirs. He called the blog a perfect example of her narcissism, She can't accept responsibility for her actions, so she creates an elaborate narrative where she's the martyr and we're the villains. He never mentioned the $73,000. He never mentioned the text message. He never mentioned disowning me. His version of events ended with, "We tried to set loving boundaries with our mother, and this is how she responded, by trying to destroy our reputations publicly." If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about her character, I don't know what will. The comments on his post were vicious. "Your mother is toxic. Good for you for protecting your family. She sounds like a narcissist. You did the right thing going no contact." Classic Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. I read every comment. Let each one land like a physical blow. This was Trevor's counteroffensive. His narrative. And it was working. His post was shared in different circles than mine: men's rights groups, anti-parental alienation forums, adult children of narcissists communities. Places where the default assumption was that parents, especially mothers, were the problem. Barbara called. Don't respond. Don't engage. Let his post speak for itself. Anyone with critical thinking skills can see what he's not saying. His calling me a narcissist, Barbara. His telling the world I'm abusive. His defensive. That's all this is. He knows your story is gaining traction, and he's scared. Let him be scared. Your story has evidence. His has rhetoric. Evidence wins. But did it? In the court of public opinion, did evidence actually win? Or did the better story win? And Trevor's story, of the martyred son escaping his toxic mother, was a good story. A familiar one. One people were primed to believe. I wanted to respond. Wanted to dismantle his lies point by point. Wanted to share the evidence he'd conveniently omitted. The payment records. The text message. The frozen pension. The GoFundMe fraud. All of it. Instead, I wrote another blog post. Not about Trevor's response. About something bigger. I titled it, "Why Society Refuses to Believe Mothers Can Be Victims." I wrote about the cultural narrative that mothers are inherently manipulative. That we're always playing the victim. That our pain is performative, our grief is attention-seeking, our boundaries are controlling. I wrote about how this narrative makes it impossible for abused mothers to get support because everyone assumes we must have done something to deserve our children's rejection. I wrote about how society tells mothers we're responsible for everything our children become, but refuses to credit us when they succeed and blames us when they fail. We're simultaneously all-powerful and completely disposable. Essential and worthless. Martyrs who shouldn't expect gratitude. I wrote about how this double bind keeps us silent. Keeps us funding and giving and accepting less than we deserve because if we speak up, we're just proving we're difficult. If we set boundaries, we're controlling. If we expect reciprocity, we're transactional. If we feel pain, we're playing the victim. The post went viral. Women shared it with their own stories attached. Thousands of stories. An outpouring of maternal grief that had been dammed up for years, for generations. Stories of daughters who ghosted their mothers. Sons who married women who erased their mothers. Grandchildren used as weapons. Holidays spent alone. Birthdays ignored. Mothers who'd given everything and been given nothing back. The response got media attention. A reporter from the Washington Post reached out. An NPR producer. A writer from The Atlantic working on a piece about parental estrangement. And then Emma broke her silence. She didn't write a blog post. She went on Facebook. On her public page, for all her friends to see, she wrote, "I'm seeing my mom's blog being shared, and I need to say something. That's not the full story. That's not even close. My mom has always twisted things to make herself look like the victim. Growing up with her was walking on eggshells. She made everything about her. She uses money to control people, then plays the martyr when we try to be independent. I love my mom, but I can't have her in my life anymore. She's not healthy for me or my family. And I'm not going to let her trash my brother publicly without saying something. There are always two sides. Remember that before you judge us." 200 comments within an hour. Half supportive of Emma. Half skeptical. And in the middle of it, a comment from Richard's wife, Carolyn. "I've witnessed Margaret's behavior firsthand for years. Emma and Trevor are brave to finally set boundaries. I'm proud of them." I stared at that comment for a long time. Carolyn. Who'd broken up my marriage? Who'd barely known my children when they were young? Who'd swept in after I'd done the hard work of raising them and gotten to play grandma to the easy, fun parts? Now she was the authority on my character. Patricia came over that night. Found me on my couch, laptop open, scrolling through comments. "You need to stop reading those," she said. "I can't. I need to see what they're saying. I need to understand how they're spinning this. They're spinning it the way people always spin it. They're protecting themselves. That's all this is. They know they look bad, so they're trying to make you look worse. What if they're right?" I said quietly, "What if I was a terrible mother? What if I did twist things? What if my memories are all wrong and there's a right?" Patricia sat down next to me, took my laptop and closed it. "Margaret, listen to me. You're not perfect. No mother is. But you were a good mother. I watched you. For 34 years, I watched you put those kids first. I watched you sacrifice and give and show up and try. Were you sad after the divorce? Yes. Were you lonely when they moved out? Of course. That's human. That's normal. That doesn't make you abusive. Then why do I feel like maybe I am? Because they've been telling you that for years. And when the people you love most tell you you're the problem, you start believing it. That's not truth, Margaret. That's gaslighting." She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things. The doubt had burrowed deep, planted by years of being told I was too much, too needy, too emotional, too something. That night, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I pulled out the box from the back of my closet. The one labeled Kids, Elementary Years. Inside were all the Mother's Day cards, the construction paper hearts, the macaroni necklaces, the crayon drawings of our family where I was always in the center, always smiling, always bigger than everything else because that's how they'd seen me then. I read every card. Every "I love you, Mommy." Every "You're the best mom in the world." Every "Thank you for taking care of me." Trevor's card from 3rd grade, "My mom is special because she never gives up on me, even when I mess up. She makes me feel safe. I love her so much." Emma's card from 5th grade, "Mom, you are my hero. When I was sick, you stayed with me every night. You told me I was going to be okay and you were right. I don't know what I would do without you." These were the same children who now called me toxic. Who said growing up with me was walking on eggshells. Who claimed I'd twisted everything to make myself the victim. Had I changed? Or had they? Or, and this was the thought that kept me up at night, had Richard been rewriting their memories all along? Had he spent years retelling their childhood with himself as the hero and me as the villain until they genuinely couldn't remember it any other way? Memory is malleable. I knew that from my teaching years, from reading about how easily false memories can be implanted. If someone tells you a story about your past enough times, especially someone you trust, eventually that story becomes your memory. The truth gets overwritten. What if their truth was just Richard's fiction repeated so many times it solidified into fact? I took photos of the cards. Added them to my blog with a new post, what they said then versus what they say now. The post was simple. Just images of their childhood expressions of love, juxtaposed with quotes from their current accusations. No commentary needed. The contrast spoke for itself. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of parents shared similar evidence, old cards, old photos, old messages, proof that their estranged children had once loved them. Before the narrative changed. Before someone convinced them to remember differently. A psychologist named Dr. Susan Whitmore reached out. She was writing a book about parental alienation in adult relationships and wanted to interview me. We talked for 2 hours. She explained the patterns she'd seen in hundreds of cases, how an alienating parent systematically rewrites history, how adult children are particularly vulnerable to this because they're trying to individuate and establish their own identity, how financial entanglement makes them feel guilty and resentful, which makes them more susceptible to the alienator's narrative. "Your ex-husband is a textbook case," she said. "He abandoned the family, but he couldn't be the bad guy in his own story. So he made you the bad guy instead. And he's been working on that narrative for 15 years. Your children believe him because believing you would mean confronting some painful truths about their father, and about themselves." What painful truths about themselves? That they've been complicit in mistreating you. That they've taken your money while badmouthing you. That they've been disloyal and ungrateful. It's easier to believe you're toxic than to confront their own character flaws. The interview ended up as a chapter in her book. She sent me an advance copy 6 weeks later. Reading about my life in clinical terms, alienation, triangulation, flying monkeys, parental estrangement, was surreal. But it was also validating. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. This was a documented pattern with a name and a treatment protocol and, most importantly, proof that I wasn't alone. The blog grew. 10,000 followers. Then 20,000. Then 50. I started receiving messages from adult children too, people who'd cut off their parents and were beginning to question their own narratives. People who'd read my story and recognized themselves as Trevor and Emma. Some apologized on behalf of all estranged children. Some attacked me. Some asked questions that suggested they were genuinely trying to understand both perspectives. One message stopped me cold. I cut off my mother 5 years ago because my father convinced me she was toxic. I've been reading your blog, and I'm realizing he lied about so much. She wasn't perfect, but she didn't deserve what I did to her. I called her yesterday. We talked for 3 hours. I don't know if we can fix this, but I'm going to try. Thank you for making me see what I couldn't see before. I read that message 10 times. 20. Some part of me hoped Trevor or Emma would read my blog and have that same realization. That they'd recognize themselves in these stories of manipulation and alienation. That they'd question Richard's narrative. That they'd come back. But they didn't. Instead, the attacks intensified. A blog post appeared on a site called Surviving Narcissistic Parents. It was titled How My Toxic Mother Tried to Destroy Me Online. The author was anonymous, but the details made it clear it was about me. It was devastating. It described me as a monster, a woman who'd made her children's childhoods about her drama, who'd used her daughter's eating disorder for attention, who'd poisoned them against their father out of jealousy, who was now conducting a public smear campaign because they dared to set boundaries. The comments were brutal. This is exactly what my mother did. Narcissists can't handle being told no. Going no contact was the best thing I ever did. Don't let her manipulate you into breaking no contact. I wanted to respond. Wanted to defend myself. But Barbara's voice was in my head. Don't engage. Let the evidence speak. So instead, I released the evidence. I created a new blog post called The Full Picture. And I included everything. The original text message in its entirety. Screenshots of the payment history, all of it, the full 73,000. The threatening letter from Richard's lawyer. The documentation of Trevor's attempt to freeze my pension. The police report about the fraudulent GoFundMe. Emma's requests for money with timestamps. Trevor's promises to pay me back, also with timestamps. Every piece of evidence I had, laid out chronologically, with minimal commentary. Just the facts. I ended with one line: I've been called a narcissist, a liar, and a manipulator. This is what actually happened. You decide. The post exploded. 100,000 views in the first day. Shared across every platform. Picked up by news sites. Debated in comment sections across the internet. And that's when everything changed. That's when I got the message I never expected. It came through the blog's contact form. The email address meant nothing to me, jessicamreynolds@gmail.com. The subject line: You need to know something about Richard. I almost deleted it. I got hundreds of messages a day by then, many from trolls, some from supporters, all requiring energy I barely had. But something made me click. Dear Margaret, it began. You don't know me, but I know you. Or at least, I know of you. I'm Richard's first wife. We were married for 4 years before he met you. He's done to you exactly what he did to me. Here's a pattern. And I think you deserve to know the full pattern. Please call me. There was a phone number. I stared at it for a full minute, my heart pounding. Richard had a first wife. He'd told me he'd been married once before, briefly, in his early 20s. Young and stupid, he'd said. We were kids. It didn't mean anything. He'd never given me details. I'd never pushed. It had felt like ancient history, irrelevant to us. Now I wondered what else I'd never pushed on. What other histories I'd accepted without question. I picked up my phone. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. Jessica, she said. Her voice was warm, slightly husky. Thank you for calling. You were married to Richard? For 4 years. Hell years. He made me feel crazy. Just like he's making you feel crazy. I've been following your story. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Why are you reaching out now? Because I saw what he's doing. The same thing he did to me. He turned my family against me, made everyone think I was unstable, and then divorced me and painted himself as the victim who barely escaped. It took me years to rebuild my reputation. And when I saw your blog, saw him doing it again, I thought you should know you're not the first. You're not crazy. He's just very good at this. At what? At destroying women who love him. We talked for 2 hours. She told me things about Richard I'd never known. How he'd isolated her from her friends. How he'd criticized her constantly, then denied he'd said anything critical. How he'd made her feel like she was imagining things, overreacting, too sensitive. How he'd turned her own mother against her by playing the concerned husband worried about his wife's mental health. How he'd had an affair and made it her fault for not being enough. How he'd left her with nothing, no money, no support, no one who believed her side of the story. The thing about Richard, Jessica said, is he's not evil. He's not deliberately cruel. He genuinely believes his own narrative. He rewrites history in real time to protect his ego. And he's so convincing because he convinces himself first. By the time he's done revising the past, he truly believes you're the villain and he's the victim. How did you recover? Time. Therapy. Distance. And honestly, meeting his second wife, you, and realizing he'd moved on to someone else helped. It meant it really wasn't about me. It was just who he is. Did you try to warn me? She laughed, but it was sad. Would you have listened? If some bitter ex-wife had called you and said your wonderful new husband was actually a manipulative narcissist, would you have believed her? She was right. I wouldn't have. So why are you calling now? Because you're living proof of the pattern. Because maybe together, our stories mean something. Because I want your kids to know that this isn't the first time their father has done this. Maybe that matters. Maybe it doesn't. But you deserve to have the full picture. After we hung up, I sat in the dark kitchen and thought about patterns. About how we repeat our traumas. About how Richard had probably learned this from his own parents. About how he'd practiced on Jessica, perfected his technique on me, and was now using our children as his final act. And I thought about Trevor and Emma. About how they'd grown up watching Richard manipulate me. Watching me accept it. Watching me bend and apologize and try harder. What had that taught them about relationships? About power? About how to treat people who love you? Maybe I hadn't been a perfect mother. But I'd modeled something terrible. I'd shown them that women accept mistreatment. That mothers don't require respect. That love means enduring abuse. No wonder they thought it was okay to treat me the way they did. I taught them. I posted about Jessica. Not in a vindictive way. I'd learned by then that vindication and vindictiveness look different on paper than they feel in your heart. I wrote a post called The Pattern Before Me and laid out the facts. Richard had been married before. That marriage had ended with him painting his first wife as unstable. He'd used the same tactics then that he was using now. This wasn't about me being difficult. This was about him being incapable of accountability. The response was seismic. Within hours, people were calling Richard out directly. His LinkedIn was flooded with comments. His business page on Facebook got review bombed. Someone found his company's contact information and sent them the blog posts. The internet had decided Richard was the villain, and the internet doesn't forgive easily. I should have felt vindicated. I felt nauseated instead. This wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want Richard destroyed. I wanted my children back. But they were so entangled with him, so invested in his narrative, that exposing him meant exposing them too. Every attack on Richard was, by extension, an attack on their judgment. On their choice to believe him over me. Trevor's wife Michelle sent me an email. Not from someone else's phone this time. Direct. You've gone too far, it said. Do you understand what you've done? Trevor's employer saw those posts. His being questioned about his character. His judgment. Our reputation in this community is ruined because of you. You claim to love your son, but you're destroying his life out of spite. How is that love? I read it 3 times. Each time, I felt the intended guilt. The accusation that I was the destroyer. That my truth-telling was the violence, not their years of mistreatment. But then I read it a fourth time and saw what was really there: panic. They were panicking because the truth had consequences. Because actions had finally caught up with them. Because the community that had believed their narrative was starting to ask questions. I didn't respond to Michelle. But I did write another post. On Consequences and Accountability was the title. In it, I wrote about how we've created a culture where setting boundaries is revolutionary but facing consequences is persecution. Where adult children can cut off their parents without explanation and it's healthy, but parents who stop funding that estrangement are abusive. Where telling your truth is a smear campaign, but lying about someone for years is self-protection. I didn't destroy my son's reputation, I wrote. I revealed it. There's a difference. Reputation is what people think of you. Character is who you actually are. If the truth damages your reputation, the problem isn't the truth, it's the gap between your reputation and your character. The post was shared 50,000 times. And then something unexpected happened. An email from Emma's boss, a woman named Patricia Chen. Wait, no. Karen Roberts. She'd seen the blog posts. She wanted to meet. I'm the director of the nonprofit where Emma works, she wrote. I'd like to speak with you about some concerns that have come to my attention regarding her conduct. This is not about taking sides in a family dispute, but about due diligence for our organization. Would you be willing to meet? I forwarded it to Barbara. Don't go alone, she said. This could be a setup. But it could also be legitimate. If Emma's been misrepresenting herself or her situation, her employer has a right to know. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our towns. Karen was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She brought a folder. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I want to be clear. I'm not here to judge your family situation. But Emma applied for emergency hardship funds from our organization 6 months ago. She claimed financial distress due to lack of family support and medical bills from her eating disorder recovery. We approved $3,000 in assistance based on her application. She slid the folder across the table. Inside was Emma's application. I read it slowly, feeling my blood pressure rise with each sentence. My mother abandoned me emotionally after her divorce, the application read. She became unstable and unable to provide support. I've had to manage my recovery from serious mental health issues without family assistance. I'm requesting help with medical bills and basic living expenses as I don't have family resources to fall back on. When did she apply for this? I asked. February 14th. February. 2 weeks before the text message disowning me. A month before I'd stopped the payments. She was receiving $500 a month from me at that time, I said. Plus her car insurance. Plus family phone plan. Plus emergency money whenever she asked. I have bank records. Karen's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. I see. She lied to you. She lied to get $3,000 while I was actively supporting her financially. That's why I'm here. When your blog posts started circulating, several board members recognized the story. They asked me to investigate. If Emma fraudulently obtained these funds, we need to recover them. More importantly, if she's representing herself falsely to clients and partners, she works in donor relations, that's a serious ethical breach. Are you going to fire her? I'm going to investigate. I wanted to give you the opportunity to provide your side first. I gave her everything. Bank statements. Text messages. Screenshots of Emma asking for money and me sending it. The timeline showing she'd been receiving consistent support when she'd claimed abandonment. Karen took notes, her pen scratching rapidly across her legal pad. When I finished, she sat back and sighed. This is disappointing, she said. Emma's been with us for 3 years. She's good at her job. But integrity is non-negotiable in our field. If she'll lie about this, what else will she lie about? I don't want her to lose her job, I heard myself say. And I meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want that. I just want the truth to matter. The truth does matter. That's why I'm here. I'll be in touch. She left. I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, drinking cold coffee, trying to process what had just happened. Emma had lied to get money from her employer. Not just a small lie, a comprehensive fabrication about being abandoned and unsupported. She'd stolen that money, really. taken it under false pretenses. And I'd inadvertently exposed her. Part of me felt guilty. Part of me felt like this was exactly the reckoning she needed. 3 days later, Emma called. Not from someone else's phone. From her own number, which meant she'd unblocked me. You got me fired. Her voice was flat. Dead. I hope you're happy. Emma. No. Don't. Don't try to explain. Don't try to justify it. You went to my boss. You sabotaged my career. Because I hurt your feelings. I didn't go to her. She came to me. Because you committed fraud, Emma. You lied to get money from a nonprofit while I was supporting you. That's not me sabotaging you. That's consequences. I needed that money. You were getting money. From me. $500 a month. You didn't need to lie. But you did. You lied to them about me, and you've been lying to yourself about me, and it's all catching up now. My life is ruined because of you. Your life is ruined because of your choices. I didn't write that application. I didn't tell those lies. I didn't disown my mother while taking her money. You did all of that. I just refused to keep pretending it didn't happen. Silence. Long and heavy. I hate you, she whispered. And somehow, those words hurt less than I expected. Because they were honest. Finally, after months of careful language and therapeutic boundaries and claims of love that felt like manipulation, finally, she was being honest. I know, I said. But that's your problem now, not mine. I hung up. That night, I got drunk for the first time in years. Not sloppy drunk, just enough to feel warm and loose and disconnected from the pain. Patricia came over and joined me. We sat in my living room, drinking wine that was too expensive for a Tuesday night, talking about everything and nothing. Do you regret it? She asked. Going public. Telling the story. Sometimes, I admitted. When I think about how it's affected them. When I think about Emma losing her job. She didn't lose her job because of you. She lost it because she committed fraud. But if I hadn't written the blog, then she'd still be a liar. Just an unexposed one. You didn't make her lie, Margaret. You just refused to be complicit in her lies anymore. Trevor's wife says I'm destroying his life out of spite. Trevor destroyed his own life by trying to freeze your pension and starting a fraudulent GoFundMe. You're just making sure there's a record of what actually happened. When does it end? I asked. When do I get to stop fighting? When you decide to. You can stop writing. You can make the blog private. You can walk away whenever you want. But they'll still be out there telling their version. Richard will still be poisoning people against me. So? Let them. You've told your truth. You've provided evidence. Anyone who still believes them after all this, they're choosing to. You can't control that. You can only control your own story. She was right. I knew she was right. But letting go felt like surrendering. Like admitting defeat. The blog had grown beyond me at that point. It had become a community. Thousands of estranged parents sharing their stories, supporting each other, validating each other's pain. I got messages every day from people thanking me for giving them permission to feel angry, to set boundaries, to stop funding their own abuse. One message particularly stood out. It was from a woman named Helen, 74 years old, whose 3 children had cut her off after she'd refused to give them her house. I've been reading your story, and I want you to know something, she wrote. This isn't about whether you're a perfect mother. It's about whether you're a person who deserves respect. And you are. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Don't let anyone tell you that being a mother means accepting mistreatment. We raised humans. We gave them everything. We're allowed to expect basic decency in return. I printed that message and hung it on my refrigerator. Some days it was the only thing that kept me going. The attacks continued, of course. New blog posts appeared calling me a narcissist, a liar, a manipulator. Richard's family rallied around Trevor and Emma, posting their own versions of events where I was crazy and vindictive and they were innocent victims. But something had shifted. The evidence was out there. The pattern was visible. And while some people still blamed me, would always blame me, because blaming mothers is easy and comfortable and culturally reinforced, more and more people were asking the right questions. Why had Trevor tried to freeze her pension? Why had Emma lied about financial abandonment while receiving support? Why was Richard's first wife telling the same story? Why couldn't anyone provide specific examples of the supposed toxicity? The narrative was cracking. Not broken, narratives that powerful don't break easily, but cracking. Light was getting through. And then I got a message that changed everything. It was from a woman named Dr. Amanda Reeves, a family therapist who specialized in reconciliation after estrangement. She'd been following my story and wanted to offer her services, not to me, but to my family. I work with families in high-conflict situations, she wrote. I've read both sides of your story. I think there's significant manipulation happening, but I also think there's genuine pain on all sides. I'd like to facilitate a mediated conversation. Would you be willing? I forwarded it to Trevor and Emma with a simple message: a therapist has offered to mediate. I'm willing if you are. No lawyers. No blog posts. Just us and a professional. Let me know. I didn't expect a response. I got one in 6 hours. From Trevor: I'll think about it. From Emma: only if Dad can be there. And there it was. The catch. The poison pill. They couldn't face me without Richard. Without their interpreter. Without someone to manage the narrative and protect them from having to sit with what they'd done. I replied to both: this is between us. Our family. Richard made his choices. He's not part of this conversation anymore. Emma responded immediately, then no. Trevor took longer. 2 days later: I need to bring Michelle. Why? Because she's my family now. Because I need support. Because I don't trust you not to twist everything I say. I showed the messages to Dr. Reeves. This is typical, she said. They're afraid to face you alone because they know their narrative won't hold up without reinforcement. They need their support people there to validate their version of events. So what do I do? You decide if you're willing to meet on those terms. If Trevor brings his wife and Emma brings your ex-husband, are you willing to sit across from all of them? Would you recommend it? Honestly, no. Not with your ex-husband there. He's the architect of this estrangement. Having him in the room would just give him more opportunity to manipulate the conversation. But ultimately, it's your choice. I thought about it for 3 days. Imagined sitting in a room with Trevor, Emma, Michelle, and Richard. Imagined Richard's smirk. Michelle's cold eyes. Emma's rehearsed accusations. Trevor's defensive anger. Imagined trying to speak my truth while they all looked at me like I was crazy. I sent my final message to Dr. Reeves: thank you for the offer, but I'm not willing to subject myself to that. If they can't face me without their handlers, then we have nothing to talk about. She understood. For what it's worth, she wrote back, I think you're making the right choice. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is stop trying to fix what other people broke. That night, I wrote what I thought would be my final blog post. When Enough is Enough was the title. In it, I wrote about the therapy offer. About their conditions. About my decision to decline. About how I'd spent 6 months trying to make them see me, hear me, understand me. About how I was done. I've told my truth, I wrote. I've provided evidence. I've answered their accusations. I've offered reconciliation. I've done everything a mother could do except one thing. I haven't apologized for refusing to fund my own erasure. And I won't. Because I didn't do anything wrong. Loving my children wasn't wrong. Expecting basic respect wasn't wrong. Having feelings wasn't wrong. Setting boundaries wasn't wrong. The only thing I did wrong was wait this long to do it. I ended with this. To other parents in this situation: you're not crazy. You're not toxic. You're not imagining things. If your adult children cut you off after you stopped giving them money, that tells you everything you need to know. If they can articulate your supposed failures but can't name a specific incident, that's not your failing, it's theirs. If they need an audience to face you, they don't trust their own accusations. You don't have to keep trying to prove you deserve love. You already deserve it. They just can't see it. That's their loss, not yours. I hit publish. And then I did something I should have done months ago. I closed the blog. Made it private. Archived it. Let it go. I'd said everything I needed to say. The rest was just repetition. Just picking at wounds that needed to close. It was time to start healing. Closing the blog felt like cutting off a limb. For months, it had been my purpose, my outlet, my way of processing the grief. Without it, I had to sit with the silence. with the absence of my children, with the reality that I might never hear from them again. The first week was the hardest. I'd wake up and reach for my phone, ready to check comments and messages, and remember there was nothing to check. The blog was gone. The conversation was over. I was just alone. Patricia came over most nights. We didn't always talk. Sometimes we just sat together, watching bad TV, eating takeout, existing in the same space. She didn't try to fix it or make it better. She just witnessed my grief. Let me feel it without trying to explain it away. "You're grieving," she said one night. "That's what this is. You're grieving your children like they died. Because in a way, they did. The children you raised, the ones who loved you, they're gone. What's left are strangers with familiar faces." She was right. That's exactly what it felt like. A death without a body. A funeral no one attended. A loss no one acknowledged because they were still alive, still posting on social media, still living their lives, just without me in them. I started going to a grief support group. Not for estranged parents. I'd had enough of talking about estrangement. Just regular grief. People who'd lost spouses and parents and siblings and friends. People who understood that death comes in many forms. When it was my turn to share, I said, "I lost my children. They're not dead, but I lost them anyway." Nobody asked questions. Nobody tried to fix it. They just nodded. They understood that loss is loss, regardless of the form it takes. Slowly, I started building a life that didn't revolve around them. I joined a book club. Started volunteering at the library. Took a watercolor class I'd been meaning to take for years. Adopted a cat from the shelter, a cranky old Tom named Chester who'd been there for 8 months because nobody wanted an older cat with attitude. Chester and I were perfect for each other. Both discarded. Both prickly. Both learning how to trust again. 3 months after closing the blog, I got an email from a lawyer I didn't recognize. Subject line, regarding estate planning. My stomach dropped. Was this another attack? Another legal threat? I opened it with shaking hands. "Dear Mrs. Harrison," it began. "I represent the estate of Jessica Reynolds. I'm sorry to inform you that Jessica passed away 2 weeks ago from complications related to cancer. Before her death, she updated her will. She left you a sealed letter with instructions that it be delivered after her passing. I've attached a scanned copy per her wishes." Jessica. Richard's first wife. The woman who'd reached out to warn me about the pattern. She was dead. I opened the attachment. Her handwriting was shaky but legible. The letter was dated 3 days before her death. "Dear Margaret," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm not afraid of dying, I've had time to make peace with it. But I am afraid that Richard will win. That his narrative will stand unchallenged. That what he did to both of us will be forgotten. So I'm writing this as a final testimony. As evidence that what you've experienced is real. That you're not crazy. That Richard has a pattern of destroying women who love him, then rewriting history so he's the hero and we're the villains. I want you to know that I believe you. Everything you wrote in your blog, everything you experienced, I believe you. Because I lived it too. And I spent 20 years thinking it was my fault. That I was too sensitive, too needy, too broken. It wasn't until I met my second husband, a good man, a kind man, a man who showed me what real love looks like, that I understood Richard was the problem, not me. I'm leaving you something else along with this letter. A box of documents. Letters from Richard to my parents, to our marriage counselor, to my friends. Letters where he carefully constructed the narrative of my instability. I've kept them all these years as proof. As evidence that I wasn't imagining it. Now I'm giving them to you. Use them however you think is right. The other thing I'm leaving you is permission. Permission to stop fighting. You've told your truth. You've provided evidence. You've done everything you could. Now you're allowed to rest. You're allowed to build a life that isn't defined by their rejection. You're allowed to be happy, even though they're not part of that happiness. I spent too many years waiting for Richard to admit what he'd done. He never did. He never will. Some people aren't capable of that kind of honesty. You can't make them see you. You can only decide to see yourself clearly. You're a good woman, Margaret. You were a good mother. What happened isn't your fault. It's just the cost of loving a man who doesn't know how to love anyone but himself, and raising children in the shadow of that dysfunction. Be happy. In spite of them. Or maybe to spite them. Either way, Be happy. That's the best revenge. With solidarity and hope. Jessica. I read it 3 times. Then I cried for an hour. For Jessica. For myself. For all the women who'd been destroyed by men like Richard and then blamed for their own destruction. The box arrived a week later. UPS, signature required, packed carefully in bubble wrap and marked fragile. Inside were 3 decades of documentation. Letters, emails, therapy notes, journal entries. Jessica's entire archive of evidence that Richard had done to her exactly what he was doing to me. I read through it all. It took me 2 days. And with each page, I felt something shifting. Not healing, not yet, but something like validation. Like proof that I wasn't crazy. That my memories weren't false. That what I'd experienced was real and documented and part of a pattern that stretched back decades. One letter in particular stood out. It was from Richard to Jessica's mother, written during their divorce. I'm deeply concerned about Jessica's mental health, it read. She's become paranoid and accusatory. She's convinced I'm trying to turn you against her, when really I'm just trying to protect everyone from her increasingly erratic behavior. I love her, but I can't live like this anymore. I hope you'll help her get the treatment she needs. The same words. The same tactics. Just a different wife. I scanned everything. Created a digital archive. Then I did something Jessica's letter had given me permission to do. I let it go. I didn't post it. Didn't use it as ammunition. Didn't send it to Trevor and Emma with a triumphant "See? I told you." I just filed it away. Evidence for my own peace of mind. Proof that I could trust my own perception of reality. And then I started living. Really living. Not just surviving the days between blog posts or therapy sessions or imagined reconciliations. Actually building a life I wanted to live. I took a trip to Maine. Something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was raising kids or supporting Richard's career or funding Trevor's mortgage. I spent a week in a small coastal town, eating lobster and reading novels and watching the ocean and not talking to anyone who knew my history. It was the most peaceful I'd felt in years. When I got back, there was a letter in my mailbox. Hand-addressed. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. Emma's. My hands shook as I opened it. Part of me hoped for an apology. Part of me expected another attack. What I got was something in between. Mom, it started. I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say it. I got your number from Aunt Linda. I know you blocked me, and I understand why. I'm not asking you to unblock me. I'm not even sure I deserve to talk to you. But I needed to tell you something, and I couldn't do it over email or through someone else. I lost my job because I lied. Not because of you. Because of me. And sitting with that, sitting with the consequences of my own actions instead of blaming you, has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than the eating disorder. Harder than anything. I've been in therapy. Real therapy, not the kind where Dad and Carolyn's therapist friend tells me I'm brave for setting boundaries. A different therapist. One who doesn't know you or Dad or any of us. And she's been asking me questions I don't know how to answer. Like, what specifically did your mother do that was abusive? And I don't have an answer. I have feelings. I have this sense that you were too much, too needy, too heavy. But I can't point to a specific thing. And my therapist says that's a problem. She says feelings without facts might mean the feelings are coming from somewhere else. She asked me to write down my memories of childhood. The real memories, not the stories Dad tells. And when I did that, when I really tried to remember what actually happened instead of what I've been told happened. Mom, you were there. For everything. Every hospital stay, every bad day, every panic attack, every time I needed someone. You were always there. Dad wasn't. He was working. Or with Carolyn. Or just, not there. But somehow in my head, he's the good parent and you're the toxic one. And I don't know how that happened. Except I think I do know. I think Dad's been telling me stories about you for so long that I stopped checking them against reality. I'm not ready to see you. I'm not ready for a relationship. I'm still so angry, and I don't even know what I'm angry about anymore. Maybe I'm angry at myself. Maybe I'm angry at Dad. Maybe I'm angry that life didn't turn out the way I thought it would, and it's easier to blame you than to face that. But I wanted you to know that I'm starting to see things differently. I'm starting to question the narrative. And I'm sorry I liked Trevor's message. I'm sorry I participated in erasing you. I'm sorry I took your money while telling people you abandoned me. I don't know if we'll ever fix this. I don't know if I'm capable of being the daughter you deserve. But I wanted you to know that you're not crazy. You're not toxic. You're not the problem you've been told you are. I hope you're okay. I hope you're happy, even though we're not part of your happiness anymore. You deserve that. Emma. I read the letter 5 times. Then I put it in a drawer. Not to forget it, to protect it. To keep it safe until I knew what to do with it. Because here's the thing, Emma's letter was a step. A small one. A fragile one. But it wasn't an apology. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was just a crack in the narrative. A tiny opening of possibility. And I didn't know if I wanted to walk through it. I called Barbara. What do you think? I asked after reading her the letter. I think she's waking up. But waking up isn't the same as making amends. She's still not taking full responsibility. She's still saying I'm not ready, like you're obligated to wait for her to be ready. Should I respond? Do you want to? I don't know. Part of me wants to throw open the door and welcome her back. Part of me wants to burn the letter and never think about her again. Then do neither. Sit with it. Let her sit with what she wrote. You don't owe her a response just because she finally managed a half apology. She was right. I didn't owe Emma anything. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, not even acknowledgement. She'd spent months destroying me publicly and privately. She'd stolen money under false pretenses. She'd given a thumbs up to my erasure. One letter didn't undo that. But it did something. It planted a seed of possibility. Not for reconciliation, not yet, maybe not ever. But for truth. For the narrative finally cracking wide enough that reality could get through. I didn't respond to the letter. But I didn't throw it away either. I kept it as evidence that even the most entrenched lies can be questioned. That people can wake up. That truth, given enough time and space, finds its way through. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Trevor. He must have gotten a new number or unblocked me from his end. We need to talk about the house. No greeting. No acknowledgement of the months of silence. Just straight to business. What house? I texted back. Your house. We need to discuss what happens with it when you die. Estate planning. I've been talking to a lawyer about protecting family assets. I stared at the message in disbelief. He was planning my estate. Making sure he got his inheritance. After everything, after disowning me, after trying to freeze my pension, after the fraudulent GoFundMe, he was worried about getting his share of my house when I died. The audacity was almost impressive. My estate is none of your business, I typed back. But since you asked, I'm leaving everything to charity. The house, the savings, the life insurance. All of it. You made it very clear I'm not your mother anymore. Mothers leave things to their children. I'm just a person you used to know. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. This went on for 2 full minutes. Finally, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I've already updated my will. When I die, the Humane Society gets the house. The women's shelter gets the savings. The library gets everything else. You and Emma get nothing. That's insane. We're your children. No. You concluded I'm no longer your mother. Remember? That was your choice. This is mine. You're doing this to punish us. I'm doing this because I have no obligation to fund people who don't consider me family. You disowned me, Trevor. You don't get to collect an inheritance from someone you disowned. That's not how this works. Dad said you'd do something like this. Of course he did. Because this is exactly what he would do. But unlike your father, I'm not doing this to manipulate you. I'm doing this because it's what I should have done years ago. I should have stopped giving to people who only take. Better late than never. You'll change your mind. I won't. And Trevor, stop contacting me about money. That's all this has ever been about for you. Money. Not love. Not family. Just money. And that well is dry. Permanently. I blocked his new number. Then I called my lawyer, not Barbara, but an estate attorney, and made absolutely certain my will was ironclad. No ambiguity. No room for them to contest it. Everything to charity. Nothing to Trevor or Emma. Was it revenge? Maybe. But it was also justice. It was also self-respect. It was also the final boundary. You can't treat me like garbage and expect a reward. That night, I sat with Chester on my lap, looking at the house I'd lived in for 20 years. The house I'd mortgaged twice to pay for Emma's treatment and Trevor's wedding. The house that held 34 years of memories, some beautiful, some painful, all mine. When I died, it would go to people who needed it. Women escaping abuse. Animals without homes. Kids without books. People who actually needed help, not people who just felt entitled to it. It felt right. It felt like taking my power back. If you're still with me, if you've listened to this whole painful journey, I want you to know something. This isn't where the story ends. But it is where I stopped letting them write it. This is where I took back the pen. And whatever happens next, whether Emma continues questioning the narrative, whether Trevor ever looks in the mirror, whether Richard's manipulation ever fully unravels, it doesn't matter. Because I'm not waiting for them anymore. I'm not holding my breath for an apology that may never come. I'm not putting my life on hold until they finally see me. I'm living. Right now. Today. Without them. And it turns out, I'm pretty good at it. Patricia threw me a birthday party in November. Just a small gathering, her, some friends from the book club, my neighbor Diane, the women from my grief group. Nobody who knew Trevor or Emma. Nobody who had opinions about our estrangement. We ate cake and drank wine and laughed about nothing important. And somewhere in the middle of the evening, I realized I was happy. Actually happy. Not pretending. Not forcing it. Not trying to convince myself that I was fine. I was fine. I was more than fine. The children I'd raised were gone. The family I'd built was destroyed. The life I'd planned had imploded. But I was still here. Still standing. Still capable of joy. And that was its own kind of victory. Later that night, after everyone left, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and thought about revenge. Real revenge. Not the petty kind, not the blog posts or the cut-off payments or the disinheritance. Real revenge is living well. It's refusing to be destroyed by the people who tried to destroy you. It's building a life they're not part of and discovering you don't need them as much as they needed you to think you did. Real revenge is being happy without them. And I was getting there. Slowly. Painfully. But I was getting there. I raised my glass to the empty kitchen. To the children I used to have, I said out loud. Thank you for finally setting me free. Chester meowed from his spot on the couch. He didn't care about my toast or my past or my complicated feelings about estrangement. He just wanted dinner and a warm lap and someone who showed up consistently. I could do that. I could be that person. For Chester. For myself. For the future I was building one day at a time. The past was done. The narrative was told. The evidence was filed away. Now came the part where I figured out who I was when I wasn't being their mother. Turned out, I was someone I actually liked. Winter came early that year. By December, my small town was blanketed in snow, the kind that made everything quiet and clean and new. I spent Christmas alone, deliberately. Patricia had invited me to her daughter's house, but I declined. I needed to prove to myself that I could be alone on a holiday and survive it. That I didn't need the performance of family to make the day meaningful. I made myself a nice dinner. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, a decent bottle of wine. I watched old movies and went to bed at 9. It was peaceful. A little sad, yes, but peaceful. And peace, I was learning, was underrated. 2 days after Christmas, my phone rang. Unknown number, but local area code. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Mrs. Harrison. A young woman's voice. This is Stephanie Walsh. I'm Trevor's neighbor. I'm sorry to call you out of the blue, but I thought you should know. Your grandson, Jackson, asked me if I knew how to find you. My heart stopped. What? He's 8 now, right? He came over yesterday while I was getting my mail. He asked if I knew his grandma Margaret. He said his parents told him you moved away and didn't want to see him anymore, but he didn't believe them. He said you used to send him cards and you always remembered his birthday and you wouldn't just forget about him. I couldn't breathe. Jackson. My grandson. He remembered me. What did you tell him? My voice cracked. I told him I'd try to find you. I didn't know if I should call, if you'd even want to hear this, but he seemed so sad. And then I remembered seeing your blog posts a while back, and I found your number through public records. I hope that's okay. It's more than okay. Thank you. Thank you for calling. He misses you, she said quietly. I don't know what happened between you and Trevor, and it's not my business. But that little boy misses his grandmother. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not the bitter tears I'd cried months ago. Different tears. Sad, yes, but also hopeful. Jackson remembered me. Jackson missed me. Jackson didn't believe their lies about me moving away and not wanting to see him. At 8 years old, he knew something was wrong with their story. I didn't know what to do with this information. I couldn't contact Jackson directly. That would be crossing a line, potentially giving Trevor ammunition for legal action. But knowing he remembered me, that he was looking for me, it changed something. It made the loss more real and more painful, but also less absolute. I wasn't forgotten. Not by everyone. I wrote Jackson a letter. Not to send, I couldn't send it. But to have. To keep. For someday, when maybe he was old enough to find me on his own and I could give it to him. Dear Jackson, I wrote. I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. I never moved away from you in my heart. I think about you every day. I remember teaching you to make cookies, and the way you'd laugh when we'd make funny faces in the dough. I remember your obsession with dinosaurs and how you'd tell me facts about pterodactyls that I'd pretend not to know just so you could teach me. I remember everything. I don't know what you've been told about why I'm not in your life anymore. I hope someday you'll be old enough to ask your own questions and form your own opinions. When that day comes, if you want to find me, I'll be here. I'll always be here for you. Whatever happens, whatever you're told, please remember this. You were loved by your grandmother. Completely. Unconditionally. And that love doesn't disappear just because we're not allowed to be in each other's lives right now. I hope you're happy. I hope you're healthy. I hope you know you're special and smart and worthy of all good things. And I hope, someday, we'll get to make cookies together again. Love always. Grandma Margaret. I sealed it in an envelope and put it with Jessica's letter and Emma's letter in a box I labeled for later. Evidence of love. Evidence of truth. Evidence that when the lies finally crumbled, if they crumbled, there would be a record of what actually happened. January brought an unexpected development. An email from a producer at a cable network. They were doing a documentary series on family estrangement and wanted to feature my story. They'd found my blog in their research and thought I'd be a compelling subject. We're looking for people willing to go on camera and share their experiences, the email said. This isn't about airing dirty laundry, it's about exploring a growing cultural phenomenon that affects millions of families. Would you be interested in participating? I sat with the offer for a week. Talked to Patricia about it. Talked to Barbara. Talked to my therapist. Yes, I'd started seeing a therapist, finally, someone to help me process the grief and trauma and figure out who I was on the other side of it all. What do you want to get out of it? My therapist asked. I don't know. Vindication. Maybe. Proof that I'm not crazy. Do you need a TV show to prove that? Or have you already proven it to yourself? Good question. Had I? Did I still need external validation? Or was I finally secure enough in my own truth that I didn't need the world to witness it? I said slowly, I think part of me wants Trevor and Emma to see it. To see me on TV, telling the story, having it validated by professionals. Part of me wants them to feel ashamed. Is that healthy? Probably not. But it's honest. She smiled. Honest is a good start. So the question is, will doing this serve your healing, or will it keep you tethered to them? Will it help you move forward, or keep you looking back? I thought about it for the rest of the session. And ultimately, I said no to the documentary. Not because I was ashamed of my story. Not because I was trying to protect Trevor and Emma. But because I was done performing my pain. I'd done that with the blog. I'd told my story. I'd been heard by the people who needed to hear it. Now I needed to live my life, not document its destruction. The producer was disappointed but understanding. If you change your mind, she said, the offer stands. I wouldn't change my mind. February brought Emma's second letter. This one was longer. More specific. Mom, it started. I've been in therapy for 4 months now. Real therapy. And I'm starting to understand things I couldn't see before. My therapist asked me to do something called a mother letter. I'm supposed to write to you about my real memories, not the stories I've been told, but what I actually remember. She said I might be surprised by what comes up. She was right. I remember being 8 years old and so sick I couldn't go to school. I remember you staying home with me even though you'd used all your sick days. I remember you reading to me and making me soup and sleeping on the floor next to my bed because I was scared. I remember being 13 and hating my body and not wanting to eat. I remember you taking me to doctors and therapists and not giving up even when I screamed at you and told you I hated you. I remember you sitting with me during meals and crying when I couldn't eat and celebrating every single bite like it was a victory. I remember being 19 and in the hospital and wishing I was dead. I remember you holding my hand and telling me you'd already lost enough and you weren't losing me. I remember you fighting with Dad because he wanted to give up on treatment and you wouldn't let him. I remember you fighting for me. Always. Even when I didn't want you to. Even when I made it impossible. And then I remember Dad leaving. I remember him sitting us down and telling us it wasn't working with you anymore. I remember him saying you'd changed, that you weren't the woman he married, that he'd tried but he couldn't fix you. I believed him. I was 23 and I believed him because it was easier than believing he was the problem. Because I'd built my whole recovery around him being the good parent. The one who didn't suffocate me with worry. The one who let me be independent. But Mom, he wasn't there. Not for the hard stuff. You were. Always you. And somehow, over the years, with Dad's help, with Carolyn's help, with Trevor's help, I rewrote that history. I made you the villain and Dad the hero. I convinced myself that your worry was control. That your presence was smothering. That your love was manipulation. I'm starting to see that maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just love. Imperfect, anxious, overwhelming sometimes, but still love. I'm not saying I'm ready to have you back in my life. I'm still so confused about what's real and what's not. I'm still untangling all the stories I've been told and trying to figure out what I actually believe. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. I'm questioning everything. I'm looking at the evidence instead of just accepting the narrative. And the evidence keeps pointing to you being there when it mattered. I'm sorry I couldn't see that before. I'm sorry I joined in erasing you. I'm sorry I was so cruel. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if we can fix this. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to see clearly. Emma. This letter was different. This letter had specificity. Had memory. Had accountability. This letter felt real. I cried when I read it. Not bitter tears this time. Something else. Something that felt like grief loosening its grip. Just a little. I responded this time. Just a short email. Emma, thank you for your letter. Thank you for questioning the narrative. Thank you for looking at the evidence. That's all I ever wanted, for you to see clearly. I don't know what happens next either. But I appreciate you trying. That matters. Love, Mom. Short. Simple. True. I didn't know if it would lead anywhere. Didn't know if Emma would keep questioning or if she'd retreat back into the comfortable story where I was the problem. But she'd taken a step. That was something. Trevor, meanwhile, took a different path. In March, I got served with legal papers. Trevor was suing me for financial abuse and coercion. The lawsuit claimed I'd used money to control him, then withdrawn support as punishment for his healthy boundary setting. He was seeking the return of all support I'd withdrawn, essentially demanding I pay him retroactively for all the months I'd stopped paying his mortgage. It was absurd. Legally groundless. But it was also expensive. I had to hire a lawyer to respond. Had to spend money I didn't have to defend against a frivolous lawsuit. Barbara handled it. She filed a motion to dismiss, attaching all the evidence. Trevor's message disowning me, his attempt to freeze my pension, the GoFundMe fraud, Michelle's nasty messages. The judge dismissed the case within 3 weeks and ordered Trevor to pay my legal fees. But the message was clear. Trevor wasn't questioning anything. Trevor was doubling down. Trevor had chosen his narrative and was sticking to it. Facts be damned. That hurt more than I expected. Emma's awakening made Trevor's entrenchment more painful. One child was trying to see the truth. The other was burying himself deeper in lies. I thought about Jackson. About what kind of man Trevor was modeling for him. About what Jackson was learning about relationships, about accountability, about how to treat people who love you. I couldn't save Trevor from himself. But maybe, someday, I could help Jackson see there was another way. The lawsuit made local news. Local man sues mother for stopping financial support. The article was sympathetic to me. The facts were damning for Trevor. But it also meant everyone in town knew our business. I stopped going to my usual coffee shop. Too many pitying looks. Too many people who wanted to tell me their opinions about my children. I found a new coffee shop 2 towns over. Started shopping at a different grocery store. Created a life where I didn't have to see the judgment or sympathy in people's eyes. Spring came. I planted a garden. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs. Things that needed tending but didn't judge me. Chester supervised from the porch, occasionally deigning to investigate the dirt. I was building something. Not the life I'd imagined. Not the one where I had my children and grandchildren. Something smaller, quieter, more solitary. But it was mine. And it was peaceful. And slowly, painfully, it was becoming enough. By summer, Emma and I were emailing regularly. Nothing deep, just small updates. She'd tell me about her new job. She'd found work at a different nonprofit. I'd tell her about my garden. We were carefully, tentatively, building something. Not mother and daughter. Not yet. Maybe never again in the way we used to be. But something. She still hadn't told Trevor or Richard that we were in contact. I'm not ready for that fight, she explained. Dad will say I'm being manipulated. Trevor will say I'm betraying him. I need to figure this out on my own first. I understood. Sort of. Part of me wanted her to stand up to them. To defend me. To say out loud that she'd been wrong. But another part of me knew that healing doesn't happen on anyone's timeline but its own. In July, she asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost said no. Email was safe. Email could be edited and considered and controlled. In person was messy. In person meant seeing each other's faces, reading each other's emotions, confronting the reality of what we'd become. But I said yes. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our towns. I got there early, nervous in a way I hadn't been nervous in years. I ordered tea I wouldn't drink and sat at a table by the window where I could see her coming. She looked older. That was my first thought when she walked in. She'd always seemed younger than her years. Something about her had remained childlike, fragile. But the woman walking toward me looked her age. Looked tired. Looked like someone who'd been through something and come out different on the other side. "Hi," she said. "Hi." We sat in awkward silence for a minute. 2 minutes. The longest minutes of my life. "I don't know how to do this," she finally said. "I don't know how to sit across from you and pretend the last year didn't happen." "Then don't pretend. Let's just be honest." She nodded. Took a breath. "I've been angry at you for so long. And I'm starting to realize most of that anger wasn't even about you. It was about me. About feeling guilty for taking your money. About feeling like I owed you something and resenting that feeling. About needing you and hating that I needed you. You don't owe me anything, Emma. You never did. That's what love is. You give because you want to, not because you expect repayment. But that's the thing, I think I needed to believe you expected repayment. Because if you didn't, if you really were just giving out of love, then I was the bad guy. I was the one taking advantage. And I couldn't be the bad guy in my own story. So you made me the bad guy instead. Yeah. She looked down at her coffee. Yeah, I did. And Dad, he made it so easy. He had all these examples of you being controlling, being manipulative. Except when I really thought about those examples, when I tried to remember them actually happening, they were all things he told me about. Not things I witnessed. Not things I remembered. Just his stories. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. Do you understand? I wanted Dad to be the good guy. Because if he wasn't, then he was just someone who abandoned us when we needed him. Who came back only after you'd done all the hard work of raising us. Who swooped in for the fun parts and let you handle the messy parts. And that made me feel used. And stupid. And angry at myself for not seeing it. So you stayed angry at me instead. It was easier. She was crying now. Not loud, just tears running down her face that she didn't bother wiping away. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. For the message. For the thumbs up. For taking your money. For lying about you. For believing Dad's lies. For all of it. This was the apology I'd wanted. The real one. The one with specificity and accountability and genuine remorse. And now that I had it, I didn't know what to do with it. I forgive you, I heard myself say. And I meant it. But I also heard the unspoken addition in my own head, I forgive you, but I don't know if I trust you. Forgiveness and trust, I was learning, were different things. I could forgive her for being manipulated, for believing her father's lies, for hurting me out of confusion and misplaced anger. But trusting her again? That was going to take time. Maybe years. Maybe forever. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about therapy, about the work she was doing to understand how she'd been manipulated. I told her about my life now, the garden, Chester, my new routines. We didn't talk about Trevor or Richard or the possibility of broader reconciliation. This was just about us. Just about the possibility of Emma and Margaret, not mother and daughter necessarily, but two people who'd hurt each other and were trying to find a way forward. When we left, she hugged me. I hugged her back. It felt strange. Formal. Like hugging an acquaintance, not my daughter. But it was a start. We started meeting monthly. Coffee. Sometimes lunch. We were careful with each other. Polite. We talked about safe things, her job, my garden, books we were reading. We didn't talk about the past unless we had to. Didn't talk about Trevor or the lawsuit he'd lost or the money he'd demanded. Didn't talk about Richard. That silence around Richard felt dangerous. Like avoiding a crack in the foundation while trying to rebuild the house. But I didn't push. Emma was still living in fear of his reaction if he found out she was seeing me. Still worried about losing his approval. Still, in her own way, controlled by him. But at least she was questioning now. At least the absolute certainty had cracked. In September, something happened that changed everything. Richard had a heart attack. Not a fatal one, but serious enough. Triple bypass surgery. A week in the hospital. Carolyn called me, not to inform me out of courtesy, but because she needed my insurance information. Apparently, I was still on some old beneficiary forms from when we'd been married. I'm not his next of kin anymore, I told her. You are. You've been married to him for 12 years. But the forms. Update the forms. I'm not responsible for him. We've been divorced for 15 years. She hung up on me. But the call rattled me. Richard was mortal. Richard could die. And when he died, all his lies would go with him. Would solidify into unchallenged history. Would become the official story that Trevor and Emma would tell their own children about why they didn't have a grandmother. Unless I did something I'd been avoiding for months. I pulled out Jessica's box. The documents she'd left me. The evidence of Richard's pattern. And I made copies. Organized them chronologically. Created a dossier of Richard's manipulation. What he'd done to Jessica. What he'd done to me. The parallel tactics. The identical language. The pattern spanning 30 years. I didn't know what I'd do with it. But I needed it ready. Just in case. Richard recovered. By October, he was home and, according to Emma, back to his usual self. Controlling. Opinionated. The center of every story. But something had shifted. Maybe it was the mortality scare. Maybe it was Emma's therapy. Maybe it was just time. But Emma started asking questions. Mom, she said during one of our coffee meetings. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you and Dad really get divorced? I'd been waiting for this question for months. Years, really. He had an affair. With his secretary, who became Carolyn. I asked him to leave. That's what you always said. But Dad says you pushed him away. That you were so focused on me and my problems that you didn't have anything left for him. That he felt abandoned in his own marriage. Is that what he says? Yeah. And I always believed him. But my therapist asked me something. She said, if your mother was struggling to manage your eating disorder, which almost killed you, and your father felt neglected because of that, who was wrong in that scenario? What did you say? I said both. That you should have balanced better. That Dad deserved attention too. And she said, should a husband who's watching his daughter nearly die from an eating disorder be demanding his wife's attention? Or should he be supporting her? Smart therapist. I never thought about it that way, Emma continued. I always felt guilty, like my illness destroyed your marriage. Like if I'd been healthier, Dad wouldn't have left. Emma, your illness didn't destroy the marriage. Your father's selfishness did. He couldn't handle not being the center of attention. Couldn't handle me needing to focus on keeping you alive instead of catering to him. So he found someone who would make him feel important. That's not your fault. It's not even my fault. It's his. But he said. I know what he said. He's been saying it for 15 years. But Emma, think about it. When you were sickest, who was with you? Who took you to appointments? Who sat with you during meals? Who slept in your hospital room? You did. And where was your father? She was quiet for a long time. Working. Or he'd visit for a few minutes and then leave because it was too hard to see me like that. Right. It was too hard for him. But I didn't have the option of leaving. You were my daughter. I didn't get to opt out because it was hard. So he blamed you for his absence. He blamed me for everything. Because that's what he does. He can't be wrong in his own story. So everyone around him has to be wrong instead. I watched her process this. Watched the narrative she'd carried for years start to crumble. He did this to his first wife too, didn't he? She asked quietly. That's what you wrote about in the blog. Jessica. Yes. Can I see the evidence? What she left you? This was a dangerous moment. Sharing Jessica's documents meant crossing a line. Meant actively undermining Richard's narrative instead of just defending myself. It meant going on offense. But Emma was asking. Emma was ready. Are you sure? I asked. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It'll change how you view your father. Maybe it needs to change. I gave her the dossier. Told her to take her time with it. To read it carefully. To think about the patterns. 2 days later, she called me crying. It's all the same, she said. Word for word, it's the same. The same accusations. The same tactics. The same, Mom, he's been doing this his whole life. He did it to Jessica. He did it to you. And he used me and Trevor to do it to you. We were his weapons. Yes. How could I not see it? Because he's very good at what he does. And because you were young and you wanted a father and he gave you a version of himself that seemed better than the real thing. I need to tell Trevor. Emma, wait. No. Trevor needs to know. He's still defending Dad. He's still letting Dad poison him against you. He needs to see this. It won't work. Trevor isn't ready. He can't afford to be ready. He's too invested in the narrative. He's built his whole justification for treating me the way he did on Dad being right and me being wrong. If Dad is wrong, then Trevor has to face what is done to me. That's a harder truth than he can handle right now. But I can handle it. Why can't he? Because you came to it yourself. You questioned. You did the work. Trevor is still being controlled by Dad. Until he decides to break free on his own, anything you show him will just be dismissed as me manipulating you. She knew I was right. But she wanted her brother back. Wanted the 3 of us to heal together. Wanted the family restored. I wanted that too. But wanting something doesn't make it possible. Give him time, I said. Keep doing your work. Keep questioning. Maybe eventually he'll see you questioning and it'll make him question too. But you can't force it. She didn't like it. But she accepted it. November came. Thanksgiving loomed, the second one without them. Emma asked if I wanted to spend it together. Just us, she said. Not at my place. Not at yours. Somewhere neutral. Let's just have a meal and try to remember what it felt like when we were family. I almost said no. The wounds were too fresh. The trust too fragile. I was terrified that we'd sit down together and all the pain would come flooding back and we'd say things we couldn't take back. But I said yes. Because she was trying. Because I was trying. Because maybe that's all healing is, 2 broken people trying, 1 awkward meal at a time. We met at a restaurant. Nothing fancy. A diner that served traditional Thanksgiving meals. We sat in a booth by the window and ordered turkey and stuffing and pie. It was strange. Eating Thanksgiving dinner in a diner with my daughter who'd spent a year hating me. We talked about small things. Her new apartment. My plans for the garden next spring. Chester's latest antics. We didn't talk about Trevor or Richard or the message or any of it. We just ate turkey and tried to be 2 people who cared about each other. Toward the end of the meal, Emma said, I'm grateful for you. For your stubbornness. If you just accepted what we did, if you just kept sending money and kept quiet, I'd still be blind. I'd still be Dad's puppet. You stood up for yourself, and that forced me to look at things I didn't want to see. So thank you. You're welcome. Though I'm not sure stubbornness is the right word. Desperation. Maybe. Self-preservation. Whatever it was, it saved me. You saved me. Again. Even though I didn't deserve it. You did deserve it. You always deserved to see the truth. I just wish you hadn't had to lose so much to find it. We finished our meal. Split the check. Hugged goodbye in the parking lot. It still felt formal, but less so. The ice was thawing. Slowly. As I drove home, I thought about Trevor. About Jackson. About the family I'd lost and the small piece of family I was reclaiming. I thought about Richard, recovering from his heart attack, still believing his own lies. And I thought about revenge. Real revenge. Not punishment. Not cruelty. Just truth. Just refusing to let the lies win. December brought an unexpected message. From Trevor's wife, Michelle. But this time, it wasn't an attack. Mrs. Harrison, it began. I'm writing to apologize. I've learned some things recently that have made me see our situation differently. I believed Trevor's version of events. I believed you were the problem. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. But I needed to tell you that I'm sorry for the nasty messages I sent. For the contempt I showed you. For participating in cutting you out of Jackson's life. Trevor and I are in counseling. Our marriage is struggling for reasons that have nothing to do with you, but everything to do with the patterns Trevor learned from his father. Patterns of manipulation and blame and refusing accountability. I'm seeing now what you must have seen years ago. I'm not ready to cross Trevor by letting you see Jackson. But I want you to know that I'm keeping record of everything. Stories. Photos. Videos. So that when Jackson is old enough to ask about you, I can give him the truth. I can show him that you loved him. That you didn't abandon him. That he was kept from you, not the other way around. I'm sorry for my part in your pain. Michelle. I read it 3 times. Michelle. Trevor's wife. The woman who'd called me vindictive and accused me of destroying her family. She was apologizing. How many dominoes were falling? How many people were waking up? I wrote back, thank you for your apology. I accept it. And thank you for keeping record for Jackson. That means more than you know. I hope you and Trevor find your way to truth, even if that truth is difficult. And I hope someday I get to know my grandson again. I meant it. I didn't forgive Michelle as easily as I'd forgiven Emma. Michelle had chosen to believe the worst without knowing me, while Emma had been manipulated since childhood. But I accepted her apology. I acknowledged her awakening. And I dared to hope that maybe, eventually, Trevor would wake up too. Christmas came. Emma asked if she could spend it with me. Just the morning, she said. I still have to go to Dad's for dinner. I'm not ready for that confrontation yet. But I want to see you. I want to give you a present. We spent Christmas morning together. She brought pastries and coffee. We sat in my living room with Chester between us on the couch, opening small, thoughtful gifts. She gave me a framed photo, one I'd never seen before. It was from her treatment facility, taken on a good day. She and I were laughing at something, her head on my shoulder, both of us looking genuinely happy despite the circumstances. I found it in my things, she said. I'd forgotten about it. But when I was going through old photos, really looking at them instead of just letting Dad's voice narrate them in my head, I saw it. And I saw the truth. You loved me. You showed up. You stayed. I did. I do. I will. She cried. I cried. We held each other and grieved what we'd lost and celebrated what we were rebuilding. I'm going to tell Dad about us, she said. After Christmas. I'm going to tell him I've been seeing you and I'm going to stop letting him poison me against you. Are you ready for that? No. But it's time. She left for Richard's house around noon. I spent the rest of Christmas alone, but it felt different this time. Less like abandonment, more like a pause. Like I had my daughter back, even if I didn't have her full time yet. The call came at 8 p.m. Mom. Emma was sobbing. I told him. I told Dad I'd been seeing you and he lost it. He said I was betraying the family. That you'd manipulated me just like he'd warned me you would. That I was too weak and gullible to see through your act. Emma, breathe. It's okay. It's not okay. He said I had to choose. Him or you. And Trevor agreed with him. They both said if I keep seeing you, I'm not welcome at family gatherings. I'm choosing you, Mom. I'm choosing the truth. But I'm losing Dad and Trevor, Anne. You're not losing anything that was real. If their love came with conditions, it wasn't love. It was control. But Jackson, I won't get to see Jackson if Trevor cuts me off too. Michelle is documenting everything. She's on your side, even if she can't say it openly yet. This isn't forever, Emma. Truth has a way of winning eventually. She spent the night at my house. We watched movies and ate leftover pastries and didn't talk about Richard or Trevor. We just existed together, mother and daughter, in the ruins of what used to be our family. The next morning, Richard's sister Judith posted on Facebook a long post about how sad it was that I'd manipulated Emma into abandoning her father. About how narcissistic mothers destroy families. About how Emma had been doing so well until I'd poisoned her mind with lies. Emma saw it. Called me in tears. How do I respond? You don't. Let her say what she needs to say. Anyone who matters knows the truth. But Emma did respond. Publicly. She posted the photo of us from her treatment facility. Captioned it, "This is my mother at my bedside during the worst period of my life. She didn't leave. She didn't give up. She fought for me. I'm sorry I let people convince me to forget that. I'm sorry I believed lies about her. I'm sorry I participated in erasing her. But I'm not sorry for choosing truth over comfortable lies. If that means losing people who can't handle truth, then I guess that's the cost." The post went viral. Hundreds of comments. Some supportive, some vicious. Richard's family and friends rallied to attack her. My friends and the readers who'd followed my blog rallied to defend her. And somewhere in the middle of the war, Trevor commented, "You don't know the full story, Emma. You're being manipulated." Emma replied, "I know more of the story than you do. I've seen the evidence. I've done the work. When you're ready to see it too, I'm here. But I'm done pretending Mom is the villain in a story where Dad is the hero. That's not our history. That's just his narrative." I watched this unfold on my phone, my heart pounding. Emma was fighting. Publicly. For me. For truth. For the real history of our family. She was risking everything to stand up to them. That night, Trevor called me. I hadn't heard from him since the lawsuit. I answered. "You've turned my sister against me," he said. No greeting. Just accusation. "No, Trevor. I told her the truth. She chose to believe it. You're destroying this family." I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to keep funding my own erasure. If the family can't survive truth, then it wasn't much of a family to begin with. You're bitter and vindictive, Anne. I'm a mother who loved her children and got disowned for expecting basic respect. You can call me whatever you want. You can believe whatever Dad tells you. But Emma sees the truth now. And someday, Trevor, I think you will too. I hope you do. Because living in his lies is going to eat you alive the way it almost ate Emma alive. Don't contact me again. I haven't contacted you once. You called me, remember? He hung up. I sat in my dark kitchen with Chester purring on my lap and thought about the family I used to have. The family that gathered for holidays and celebrated birthdays and looked, from the outside, like we had it all figured out. That family was gone. Had been gone for years, really. I'd just been too desperate to hold on to the illusion to see it. But something else was forming. Something smaller. More honest. Emma and me. Michelle documenting the truth for Jackson. A fragile foundation built on reality instead of lies. It wasn't the family I'd wanted. But it was the family that could actually exist. And maybe, eventually, that would be enough. By the time January rolled around, I'd been estranged from Trevor for a full year. The anniversary felt significant, like marking time since a death. 1 year since we've concluded you're no longer our mother. 1 year since my life split into before and after. But I'd survived it. More than survived, I'd rebuilt. The life I was living now didn't look anything like the life I'd imagined. But it was mine. Built on truth instead of obligation. Chosen instead of assumed. Emma came over every Sunday now. We had brunch together, me and her and Chester. We talked about everything, her therapy breakthroughs, my plans for the spring garden, books we were reading, the small details of living that made up actual relationship instead of performative family. We talked about the hard things too. Her eating disorder and how my anxiety had both helped and hurt during her recovery. My marriage to Richard and what she'd actually witnessed versus what she'd been told. The ways I hadn't been perfect and the ways their narrative had exaggerated my imperfections into crimes. I think I needed you to be terrible, she said one Sunday morning over pancakes. Because if you weren't terrible, then I had to face that I'd been terrible to you. And that Dad had been terrible. And that I'd spent years being cruel to someone who loved me. That's a hard truth to live with. Are you living with it now? Barely. But my therapist says that's progress. We laughed. Real laughter. The kind that comes from shared understanding instead of forced cheerfulness. Trevor, meanwhile, doubled down. He unfriended Emma on Facebook. Told their extended family she'd been brainwashed. Started his own blog, Breaking Free from Toxic Parents, where he positioned himself as the survivor of maternal narcissism who'd escaped and was now helping others do the same. I didn't read it. Emma did, then called me crying. He's lying, she said. About everything. Making up stories that never happened. Saying you threatened him, gaslit him, isolated him from Dad. None of it's true. I know. Shouldn't you defend yourself? I've spent a year defending myself, Emma. I'm tired. Trevor has chosen his story. He needs that story to justify what he's done. I can't fight someone's need to believe their own lies. But people believe him. Some people will always believe the worst. That's their problem, not mine. She struggled with this. Wanted to fight for me. Wanted to comment on his blog posts with corrections and evidence. I asked her not to. This isn't your fight, I said. You've already lost Trevor by choosing truth. Don't lose yourself trying to save him from his own choices. In February, Richard had another heart attack. A bigger one this time. He didn't survive. Carolyn called to tell me. Her voice was flat, exhausted. He's gone. The funeral is Saturday. I'm calling because the kids should know you were informed. Thank you for letting me know. Are you coming? To the funeral? I don't know. Do you want me there? I don't care either way. But Emma probably does. She hung up. I sat with the news for hours. Richard was dead. The man who'd been the architect of so much pain, gone. I tried to feel something, grief, relief, anger, but mostly I felt numb. He'd been dead to me for years anyway. This was just making it official. I called Emma. I know, she said before I could speak. Carolyn called me. Mom, I don't know how to feel. Neither do I. Should we be sad? We can be whatever we are. There's no should in grief. The funeral was surreal. A church filled with people I used to know, all performing grief for a man they'd collectively decided was wonderful. Colleague after colleague spoke about Richard's brilliance, his dedication, his generosity. Carolyn spoke about their beautiful life together. Nobody mentioned his first marriage or the children he'd neglected during their formative years. Nobody mentioned the manipulation or the lies or the pattern. Trevor spoke. Called Richard the best father anyone could ask for. Thanked him for teaching him about integrity and honor and staying true to yourself. Shot me a look across the church that was pure venom when he said, he taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from toxicity. Emma sat next to me through it all, her hand in mine, occasionally squeezing when the lies became too much. After the service, people avoided me. I was the first wife. The problem. The one Richard had heroically escaped. Only a few people approached, old friends who knew better, who'd watched Richard's pattern over the years. Patricia hugged me hard. He's gone. He can't hurt you anymore. He's not gone, I said. His lies are still here. Trevor's still spreading them. Then let Trevor carry that burden. You're free now. Was I? Richard was dead, but his narrative lived on in Trevor. In the people who believed Trevor's blog. In the family members who'd chosen sides without knowing the full story. But Emma was free. That's what mattered. She'd escaped before Richard's death locked her into his narrative forever. At the reception, Trevor approached us. First time I'd seen him in person in over a year. He looked older. Harder. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I was his wife for 18 years. I have every right to be here." "You have no rights. Not to him. Not to us. Not to anything." Emma stood up. "Trevor, stop. Stay out of this, Emma. She's got you confused, but I'm not falling for it." "She didn't confuse me. She just told me the truth. Dad's truth was lies. Your truth is lies. I'm done with lies." "Then you're choosing her over your own brother." "I'm choosing reality. You should try it sometime." He walked away. We didn't see him again that day. That night, Emma and I sat in my living room, drinking wine, processing the funeral. "Do you think he'll ever wake up?" she asked. "Trevor?" "I don't know. Maybe. Maybe after he has time to sit with Dad being gone. Maybe without Dad whispering in his ear, he'll start to think for himself. Or maybe he'll just become Dad. Carry on the pattern. Maybe. That's his choice to make." "What about Jackson? What happens to him?" "Michelle is documenting. When he's old enough, he'll have the choice to seek truth. That's all we can hope for." We sat in silence for a while. Then Emma said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up. For fighting back. For making it impossible for me to stay comfortable in the lies. You saved me, Mom. Again." I cried. Not sad tears. Something else. Relief, maybe. Or gratitude. Or just the release of a year's worth of pain finally finding its way out. March brought spring. I planted my garden with Emma's help. We worked side by side, our hands in the dirt, talking and laughing and existing in a space where the past didn't define us. "I've been thinking about something," Emma said as we planted tomatoes. "I want to write a blog. About what happened. About being manipulated by a parent into cutting off another parent. About waking up. About what it's like on the other side." "Are you ready for that?" "No. But I think I need to do it anyway. For other people like me who are living in the lies and don't know it yet." "What will Trevor do?" "I don't know. Attack me, probably. But I can handle it. You taught me that. You taught me that telling the truth is worth the cost." She started her blog in April. Called it Unlearning Lies, A Daughter's Journey. She wrote about our estrangement from her perspective. About believing her father's narrative. About the cognitive dissonance of knowing I'd been there for her while believing I was toxic. About the slow, painful process of waking up. The blog went viral. Just like mine had. Tens of thousands of readers. Comments from other adult children who'd cut off parents and were starting to question why. Comments from parents thanking her for giving them hope that their children might wake up too. And comments from Trevor. Vicious ones. Calling her a traitor. Saying she'd betrayed the family. Warning others that this was proof of how manipulative I was, that I'd even turned his own sister into a weapon against him. Emma responded once, publicly, "I'm not Mom's weapon. I'm my own person, finally, after years of being Dad's weapon against her. If my honesty threatens you, that says more about your lies than my truth." Then she blocked him. Stopped reading his attacks. Focused on her own healing instead of his accusations. By summer, we'd settled into a new normal. Emma and I had our Sundays. I had my garden and my book club and my grief group and Chester. I'd built a full life, smaller than before, quieter, but full nonetheless. I stopped checking Trevor's blog. Stopped hoping for his awakening. Accepted that some people stay lost in the lies. That you can't save everyone. That sometimes letting go is the only loving thing left to do. In August, on what would have been my 36th anniversary with Richard if we'd stayed married, I did something symbolic. I took off my wedding ring, the one I'd kept wearing even after the divorce, even after everything, because some part of me had still been tethered to what we'd been. I buried it in my garden. Right next to the tomatoes. Let it become part of something that grew instead of something that held me back. Emma was there. We made it a ceremony. A funeral for the past. For the family that used to be. For the illusions we'd both carried too long. What do we do now? Emma asked as we patted down the dirt. We live, I said. We grow. We tell the truth. And we trust that truth has its own power, even when we can't see it working. September brought an unexpected message. From Jackson. He was 9 now, old enough for an email account. Michelle must have helped him. Dear Grandma Margaret, it said. My mom showed me pictures of you. She said you didn't forget me. I didn't forget you either. I remember making cookies. Can we make cookies again sometime? Love, Jackson. I cried for an hour. Then I wrote back, Dear Jackson, I would love to make cookies with you again. I've been waiting for you. I'll always wait for you. Love, Grandma. Michelle followed up with her own email. Trevor doesn't know. But Jackson asked about you. He remembers you. And I couldn't lie to him anymore. He wants to see you. If you're willing, we can arrange something. Somewhere Trevor won't find out. Just you and Jackson. No promises beyond that. But I think he deserves to know his grandmother. I met Jackson in October. At a park halfway between our towns. Michelle brought him, waited nearby but gave us space. He was so big. 9 years old. Missing his front teeth. Wearing a dinosaur t-shirt, still loved dinosaurs, apparently. Hi, Jackson. Hi, Grandma. We hugged. And it felt like coming home. We spent 2 hours together. Talked about school and dinosaurs and everything he'd been doing. He didn't ask why I'd been gone. Michelle had explained it in terms he could understand. Grown-up problems, his dad's rules, nothing to do with love. When it was time to leave, he hugged me again. Can we do this again? As often as your mom will let us. Okay. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, buddy. I drove home in tears. But good tears. Healing tears. I'd lost Trevor. Maybe forever. But I'd gotten Emma back. And now, maybe, Jackson too. Not the whole family. Not the way it used to be. But something real. Something built on truth instead of lies. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and thought about the message that had started everything. We've finally concluded that you're no longer our mother. They tried to erase me. To write me out of the story. To make me disappear. But I was still here. Still standing. Still loving the ones who'd let me love them. Still building a life worth living. They'd concluded I was no longer their mother. But they couldn't conclude away my worth. My truth. My right to exist with dignity. I'd survived their erasure. More than survived, I'd rebuilt. And in rebuilding, I discovered something important. I was more than just their mother. I was Margaret. A person in my own right. A woman with value that didn't depend on their approval. That was the real revenge. Not making them suffer. Not destroying their reputations. Just refusing to be destroyed by their rejection. Just living well. Loving well. Telling the truth well. And that, in the end, was enough. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. Thank you for witnessing my pain and my healing. Thank you for understanding that family isn't always blood, and blood isn't always family. Thank you for seeing me when my own children couldn't. To anyone out there living their own version of this story, you're not alone. You're not crazy. You didn't imagine it. And you deserve better than what you got. Set your boundaries. Tell your truth. Stop funding your own erasure. And then build a life that doesn't depend on people who can't see your worth. That's the best revenge there is. Make sure to check the description box below for more stories like this. Stories about survival and truth and the complicated, painful, beautiful work of reclaiming yourself after betrayal. I'm Margaret. I'm 63 years old. I'm estranged from my son and rebuilding with my daughter. I have a grandson who remembers me. I have a garden and a cat and a life I actually like living. And I'm no longer anyone's mother by obligation. I'm just myself. Finally. Beautifully. Unapologetically. And that's worth more than any family that required me to be less.